you. I would like to call to order this meeting of the San Diego Water District, Wednesday, May 19th, 2021 it is 5:16 p.m. Sorry, we're a little late. And if the clerk could please call the roll.
Absolutely. Board Member Hinsey?
Here.
Board Member Lyons?
Here.
Board Member Mosca? He's here. Board Member Mosca is present. Vice President Blakespear?
Here.
And President Kranz?
Here.
Record will show all members of the San Diego Water District Board are present. And please note that San Diego Water District Board members do receive an independent stipend of $100 for convening the Water District meetings pursuant to San Diego Water District Resolution number 89-07.
Thank you. And with that, I'd like to ask that you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, tonight is a very special night. We do have special presentation, and it is a presentation of the North County Water Agency's Water Awareness Poster Contest winners. And let's see here. I am going to find the email that I'm supposed to have up by now. I apologize for the delay here. Okay. Each year, the San Diego Water District partners with the North County Water Agencies to hold the Water Awareness Poster Contest. The contest is open to all fourth grade students residing or attending school within the district boundaries. This year, our students, teachers, and parents were faced with an incredibly challenging school year. But I'm happy to say that didn't stop their creativity. This year's contest theme was Love Water, Save Water. And over 50 fourth graders shared some unique and original ideas through their artwork. Our water district employees, along with city staff and council members, had the opportunity to view and vote on which posters would represent our district in the 2022 North County Water Agency's Water Awareness Calendar. It was a bright spot in a difficult year for our essential workers. On behalf of the Board of Directors of the San Diego Water District, I would like to thank all of the students and teachers who participated in the contest and the parents who encouraged them. I am especially proud to congratulate our 3 winners. And so with that, we have the 3rd place winner, and it's Teagan Bruce. Teagan is a student at Ada Harris Elementary in Cardiff. Her poster is of a sea turtle swimming the ocean floor. As the poster says, "We love water." Teagan will be receiving a Target gift card for $50 and a tote bag with her artwork printed on it. Congratulations, Teagan. Is Teagan here today? No Teagan. Thank you. Great picture. Love turtles. Our 2nd place winner is Luke Mossman. Luke attends Capri Elementary School, and there he is. He's joined us here at the meeting. Very good. Luke attends Capri Elementary School. His sophisticated image illustrates the fate of the planet is in our hands, and that saving water helps save the planet. He'll be getting a gift card for $75 and a tote bag with his artwork as well. Well done, Luke. Hi, Luke.
Thank you.
You want to say a few words about your drawing?
No.
No. Okay. Very good, and congratulations. And enjoy that gift card in the bag. Thank you.
Okay.
And the 1st place winner is Emilia Hulp. And she attends Ocean Elementary School. Her vivid drawing shows a rain barrel capturing precipitation and using it to irrigate a garden. an effective way to reuse water. Her Target gift card is worth $100, and she'll also receive a tote bag with her artwork. Congratulations, Emilia.
Thank you.
And I'm very impressed the creativity and insight of our participants. Thank you all three award winners, as well as everyone else who submitted drawings. This is one of those competitions that are always hard to pick winners, because by submitting, you have essentially made yourself a winner. So congratulations to all of you. And we are proud to have you as a part of our Encinitas community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
All right, are there any oral communications?
No, there are not.
And are there any changes to the agenda?
There are no changes to the posted agenda, and there have been no requests to pull items from the consent calendar.
Okay, that leaves us consent calendar items 8A through 8G. And I would entertain a motion for approval.
This is
So
Board Member
moved.
Hensy, and I'll move approval.
Second.
Is that Kelly?
Yes.
I mean, Board Member Hensy, sorry. Board Member Mosca. Okay, Board Member Hensy,
Yes.
Board Member Lyons,
Yes.
Board Member Mosca,
Yes.
Vice President Blakespear,
Yes.
and President Crayons.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Okay, thank you. Moving on, the action items. Item 10A is an update on the status of the San Diego Water District's 2020 water rate study. And the contact is Finance Manager Kazungu. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you, President Kranz and members of the board. The district attempts to conduct a water rate study at least every 2 years to ensure that water rates and charges are sufficient to meet the revenue requirements of the water enterprise. Rates from the last study were in 2019 were implemented beginning May 1st, 2019, and again on June 1, 2020. Then in November 2020, the board approved a contract with Raftelis Financial Consultants to conduct a 3-year rate study. Since that last study, much has happened. Water purchase costs from the County Water Authority have continued to rise. The district CIP has been impacted by Lake Hodges structural assessment and safety concerns, and the world has experienced a pandemic. But the district also received a $368,000 windfall from a litigation settlement between the County Water Authority and the Metropolitan Water District. These and other factors were incorporated into the current study, which you're going to get in the current study, resulting in the rate scenarios that you're going to be presented today. I will now hand you over to Steve Gagnon and Jonathan Jordan of Raftelis Financial Consultants to discuss the study and the resulting scenarios. Over to you, Steve.
Thank you, Mary. Good evening, board members. I'm going to share my screen with you now. And I need to first make it big. Okay, so now do you see one big slide or do you see 2 slides?
2.
2, okay, so I need to go here and swap. There you go. Now you should see one big slide, I hope.
True.
Okay, great. So just a brief introduction before we get started. This is the Raftelis project team that has been assisting your staff. I'm on the left. I've been consulting for more than 20 years, and about half of that I've been helping water agencies like yourself set rates in Southern California. And on the right, Jonathan Jordan has done much of the number crunching for this. And like I said, we've been working with your staff, Mary, Isam, and Blair, and they've been very helpful in getting us information and providing direction. So this is our brief agenda this evening. We'll go through the assumptions that we use to project your revenue and expenses. Then we'll take a look at your financial health. Then we'll take a look at rates, what it means for customer bills, and then wrap up with one slide on drought rates. And let's first talk about assumptions. We are using calculated water sales revenue for all years. And what I mean by that is we did a calculation by taking all your customers, multiplying by their fixed charges, and then multiplying your total water sold multiplied by the rate to calculate your rate revenue, to estimate your rate revenue for all years. This is lower than the budgeted revenue that we received from the district. So if anything, we're being conservative, okay? We just want you to know that the budget that we received was a little bit optimistic, and we decided as a group to not use it because you likely won't get the amount of revenue that you had in your budget. We assume that accounts will grow 1% per year, and that's for 3/4-inch residential meters only. We assume that water demand will increase 1% every year. And in the financial plan that you will see, the capital improvement program is fully funded 100% for the 3-year rate case. And in the assumptions, we're showing 5 years worth of assumptions, but the district, as Mary said, is setting rates for 3 years. Okay. So as Mary said, you buy water from the San Diego County Water Authority, and we have to assume, or we have to make a reasonable estimate of what you're going to pay for water. And this slide at the bottom shows your total water purchase costs. Here, I assume you can see my cursor circling here. And so you can see it's around 6 million in the early years, and then it gets up to around 7.6 million in the out years. So you get water from Lake Hodges and the San Diego County Water Authority. This next slide simply shows that you're also paying back debt. And we assumed a yearly debt service of $1.4 million a year. And as you can see, it ends in 2025. And all of these things are funded by your rates. This next slide shows what we assumed for your capital program. You can see in the top line, some of it is for San Diego's own projects. Then you have a joint facility projects with, I believe it's Rancho Santa Fe. And then lastly, you have the Lake Hodges Dam repair. We've budgeted $500,000 and a little bit more because it gets inflated in the out years. So that's why it's going up. A little more than $500,000 each year for the total shown at the bottom. So it starts around 3 million, goes up and down a little bit, but it's around 3 million for the 3-year rate case, a little more than 3 million. Okay. So now with those assumptions, we'll take a look at your financial plan. But before we do that, it's useful to talk about your reserve targets. So as you know, you have a few reserve targets. You have an operating reserve here, and that's 90 days of your annual operating budget. So 3 months worth of operating costs you would like to hold in reserve. Then you have a capital replacement reserve, so you can issue contracts when you rebuild your infrastructure. And that capital replacement reserve is the average yearly capital expense over 5 years. So it's a typical year's capital expenses, okay? And in the upcoming graphs, you will see that represented by a green line, those two reserves added together. You also have a rate stabilization reserve, which is good because, as you know, the conventional wisdom is that we're already in a drought, So this rate stabilization reserve will be a great thing to have. And then you have a small vehicle replacement contribution, which funds fleet replacement. Okay, so those are your reserve targets, and you'll see them in lines on the financial graph, which we'll get to next. And lastly, for your CalPERS unfunded actuarial liability payment plan, right now we assume the 15-year payment plan, okay, which is the one that funds your pension the most rapidly. Okay, so you're paying the most, but obviously by paying the most, you pay less over the whole loan. And this was assumed in the last rate study, and this payment ends in fiscal year 2033. Okay. And so with the help of staff, we developed 3 scenarios for you. And this is a starting point. If for some reason you wanted to see another scenario, we could do that. But I've found in my experience, we don't want to present 10 scenarios because that's usually too much. So we developed 3 scenarios for you. We have a low revenue adjustment, which on the left here involves 6.5% revenue adjustments over the 3 years. So that simply means that next year we would set rates such that your total revenue will go up by 6.5%, and then another 6.5%, and then another 6.5% over 3 years. So that's the low scenario. Then we have what we're calling maybe a medium scenario where it's 7% revenue adjustments every year. And then we have a high revenue adjustment, which is 7.5% revenue adjustments each year. And you'll see each scenario gets you closer to your different reserve targets. So essentially one of the most important questions you'll want to answer is how close do you want to meet your reserve targets over say 3 or 5 years. And just remember that revenue adjustments are not the exact same, but they're pretty close, but they're not the exact same as bill increases. And at the end of the presentation, we will be looking at bill impacts. So let's take a look at scenario number 1. Again, this is the 6.5% rate increase, and I'll explain these 2 graphs. So on the left here, on the left graph, you see these stacked bars. Those are your projected reserve ending balances each year. And then you have the 3 lines, which are your reserve targets that we just talked about in the prior slide. So this dotted blue one here is simply your O&M reserve. I view that as an absolute must-hit reserve, and you are hitting it and you're beating it, as you can see by the stacked bars. And then the green line is your O&M reserve, which is the blue one, but to it is added the capital reserve, 1 year's worth of CIP. So that's the green line. And then lastly, the yellow line is all your reserves that we just looked at. So it's O&M, CIP, rate stabilization, and then the fleet reserve. So again, that's in the yellow line. And your staff reminded me that one thing you would be interested in is, I understand you received a settlement or a refund from a case involving the San Diego County Water Authority. You received about $370,000, if you allow me to round. And you can see that effect right here. It's obviously going into your reserve balances, and you can see that it's represented by the red here. And we did a little bit of sensitivity analysis. And one way to look at it is that if you decided that you wanted to be at the end of fiscal year 2026, let's say, let me just round this to 10 million. You can see the stacked bar is close to 10 million here. If you said at the end of 2026, we want to have roughly 10 million in reserves, then if you didn't have this settlement, this rate increase right here would have to be 6.8% to get your reserves to this level. Okay, so if you're just wondering how much is this helping us, roughly it's about 0.3% revenue, lower revenue adjustment from this settlement refund. Okay. And then on the right here, this simply shows your your expenses. So the stacked bars, the colors are your expenses. So the blue is your O&M, the green is your debt, the yellow is your CIP. And then you see these lines here. These lines are your anticipated rate revenue, both current. So this blue line assumes you don't do anything to your revenue, you know, as though you're not even doing a rate study. And then the darker line is with the 6.5% revenue increases each year. And you can see that in the early years, your expenses are a little bit higher than your revenue, which is the line. So therefore you have to dip into reserves, which is this green area here. This is your dipping into reserves. And when you dip into reserves, your reserve balances go down, as you can see here. So you dip into reserves for the first 4 years. That's why your reserves go down. And then in the last year, you're no longer dipping in reserves, but you're starting to fund reserves, as you can see by this little green area up here. Okay, so that's with the 6.5% rate increase. And now let's take a look at the 7% rate increase, and I'll just toggle back. So if you remember, 6.5, you were not quite by fiscal year 2026, which by the way, you're setting rates for these 3 years, but we project 5 years out. It's fairly common to project 5 years out. And so at fiscal year 2026, you weren't quite at the green line, but with 7%, you're touching the green line. Okay, so this is all the same information, but with a 7% yearly revenue adjustment. And then lastly, we have the 7.5% revenue adjustment. And as you can see, you start to surpass the green line and you're on your way to the yellow line. So historically, I understand I've been fortunate enough to do your rates for the past 3 rate setting engagements. And historically, I understand that you have been striving to hit the yellow line. If that provides any context for you, you've been striving to hit the yellow line. And then I guess there's one more. I thought it would be a good idea if anyone had the question, well, what does it take to actually hit that yellow line? If that was indeed your goal. And you can see it would require 8.5% for the next 3 years to reach that yellow line. Okay, so that's your financial plan. So this just talks about how much revenue. And the next slides talk about your rates, how we're going to get that revenue. I don't know if this is a good time to pause for questions, or we can take questions at the end. It makes no difference to me. I'll just pause for a second here before I move on.
I don't see any raised hands, so it looks like you could, well, there's Board Member Mosca. Yes, sir.
So thank you, Steve, once again for working with us this time around and for your presentation so far. When we talk about, I don't know if this is a question for staff, the $1.9 million for joint facilities, is that, that's not the debt servicing, that's the full amount that we're expecting to spend in that fiscal year on capital improvements with our partner Santa Fe Irrigation District. Is that the 1.9? So that's not.
Oh, yeah, I'll take that. We have been through the years, we have been putting a certain amount of money each and every year to address the joint facilities. So we have a fund that we have been funding for the past few years. So every year there's 1.75. That doesn't really mean that we are spending that amount of money. For example, next year we would need about $4 million plus in order to fund the joint facilities projects that are currently in construction. But as we went through the years, we have been accumulating that money so that we will have no impacts or major impacts on our budgets through the years.
All right, so here in 21, 22, 21, we're at 1.9 that we're putting in the budget. And so we're saying that, because it looks like the bonds are coming to, the bonds that we have outstanding, which I assume are all or portion, a large portion of them are attributable to the joint facilities. they're coming to an end. But our budget is assuming that we're going to start paying as you go, as opposed to debt financing for some of these items, or is that, so do we go back and forth between debt financing and pay as you go?
Mary, do you have an answer to this question of the history behind that?
Board Member Mosker and members of the board, the bonds are, we budget for those in our debt service fund, which is this slide that Steve is showing currently. And that shows the bonds, we're basically paying them down in the next few years. This has not, this amount has nothing to do with the 1.9 million that's for the CIP projects and the joint facilities. So, you know, not to get them confused, the CIP is the joint projects that we are doing, and then the debt service is set aside separately for us to pay that.
Right. So no, I understand that. So with the bonds, the debt that we have, that is attributable to joint facilities, or is that for something else that we took out bonds for?
Yes, it was for the joint facilities, and then they were refinanced, you know, due to lower interest rates.
So my point is that we basically, at one point, we had the philosophy of taking out debt to making capital improvements, but now we're basically plotting out 1.9 in 21, 1.7, 1.7 in 2023, 1.8 in 2024. So we've moved away from indebtedness to improve some of the capital, some of our capital improvements, and we've moved toward paying as you go. And so I'm just wondering why that switch? Why would if we basically worked with the joint facilities and said, let's, you know, the bonds are coming to a close, we have $3 million of projects. Would it be cheaper to basically, would it be less money to finance that as opposed to paying out of our pocket every fiscal year? That's kind of my question, I guess. I don't know if we have.
We ran the numbers for the Lake Hodges one. We did not run it for the joint facilities, because this seems to have been the trend for the past few years, based on what I reviewed, that we have been adding $1.75 million. And I guess at one point in time, there was a decision made that we're gonna do it pay as you go rather than debt service. But for Lake Hodges, for example, we started the same thing, having a fund in there to cover whatever the expenses would be, so that we have some funds in there for us to be able to spend in the future rather than having to go through debt. But when we did the debt, the bond issuance and how much it would be, it turned out to be something close to, if it's 4%, correct me if I'm wrong, Steve, it was like more like $1 million a year. And if it's 3%, it's like $850,000 a year. Yeah. So we, as you know, for example, on Hodges, we really do not know what and how that project is going to end up at, and what kind of grants or loans that the city of San Diego would have. On the joint facilities, this has been the norm that we, through the past at least 10 years that I've seen from the reports, we have been adding $1.75 million each and every year. But I see your point. It's a very good point. Yeah, that it will reduce the percentage rate that we might need, but then
I mean, yeah, I just think, like, when you look at where the market's at today, I just wonder, you know, if we worked our partnership, since those bonds, I think I remember the last joint committee that we had with Santa Fe Irrigation District, their bonds may have been completely exhausted and paid off. So, you know, I just wonder, you know, if we borrowed some of this money as opposed to just kind of paying as you go, whether the servicing of the debt would actually, whether we would save money for our ratepayers. And so I'll just flag that for you and see if, you know, and also Lake Hodges, I mean, like, you know, $500,000. I mean, like, if the fix is going to be that large, I mean, really, is $500,000 going to ever pay for those improvements? So, you know, aren't we going to use some sort of debt in the future to pay for that? I'll just flag those to take a look at in the future, whether or not we can do something that's more efficient and less costly on our ratepayers. You mentioned, Steve, that we put in the settlement, and I see that represented. Are there other funds that we can kind of, as we look toward the future, and the governor is kind of walking around talking about $100 billion package, and there's a lot of money in there for transportation and water. I know the County Water Authority had sent out a whole kind of breakdown on water. There's a lot of money for potable reuse and other projects, but wondering if there's any money, have we looked at all of those potential funds for anything that we're doing so that we can offset, out of our operational expenses or capital improvement program?
I think Mary might be best to answer that. I know there's definitely a lot of money out there with WIFIA loans and so on. I personally haven't looked at it. Mary?
Thank you, Board Member Mosca. As you indicated, there is a lot of money out there, but all the information is still so new that nothing has come down the pike yet on exactly how this will affect the utilities and the water districts. So we're kind of in a wait and see mode to see what information will be coming out from the state, from the federal government. But we are planning to hopefully jump on every financing opportunity that becomes available to us.
And I would like to add that we actually have shovel-ready projects. We have a list of those that are ready to go once we will be able to figure out what the conditions and terms of these grants, loans, whatever they're going to be providing us with. So we have quite a few of those that we would like to get grants for.
All right, perfect. And then Steve, later on, I'm hoping that later on in the presentation that if we look at scenario 1, 2, or 3, that you'll show us how we stack up against the other water districts in the area, and ones that we've generally compared ourselves to. And then also, will we have for the boards boards looking at, will we have if the board decides to go with scenario 1, then you can expect several years in the future, once those rates have been put in place and you're moving forward, that you'd have to basically what the jump up to the jump up in the subsequent years are to kind of get to where we want to be in terms of some of our reserve policies. Because if we don't go with like for instance, the aspirational goal would be to kind of hit that 8.5%. But if you don't hit that, and every year that you don't hit it, that you basically subsequently kind of are having to raise the rates even higher to meet some of those thresholds and goals. And so I was wondering if at some point you'll show us that analysis.
So far, we don't have the former that you just mentioned, which is the comparative analysis, but we could definitely get that for the next presentation.
Right.
And then for the out years, that would be true, except that oftentimes, you have to keep your same assumptions, and every so many years we update the CIP. And so what you decided 3 years ago is kind of sometimes out the window because you freshen up the CIP, you know what I mean? But we'd be happy to show you those at a future presentation. So in other words, we'll show you not just the next 3 years, but say 5 years, if that would be helpful, or even 6 years.
Yeah, no, fair point. And I mean, you've been working with us for a while, and Isham just said that we've consistently put the same amount in for CIP. So, I mean, there's some consistency. So, if, for instance, the board went with scenario 1, after this rate study, and you're going to do another rate study in the future, there's going to be a need to significantly jump up if we want to keep to some of our reserve policies that we've kind of put in place.
Okay, and then I thought I'd just touch on your first question about debt. I think, with the Lake Hodges capital, I think what we perhaps we're thinking is that you may have to go into debt for Lake Hodges. And so we would fund Lake Hodges a little bit at a time, which would decrease the amount of debt that you would need, say 5 or 10 years from now, and you would reserve your debt capacity, so to speak, for the Lake Hodges project. And since these revenue adjustments are roughly in line with what we've been doing for the past several years, we thought that perhaps there isn't a need for debt. But of course, you could issue debt. I mean, there's no right or wrong here, and absolutely the revenue adjustments would go down. But again, because we thought all of this is in line with the past, I think staff decided to stay with pay as you go.
All right. Yeah. No, I'm not anxious to raise debt. I just want to make sure that we are doing the most efficient thing for the ratepayers. Thank you.
Board members, I'd also like to add that with regard to the bond issue, we're trying to hold out our debt capacity in anticipation of what's going to happen with Lake Hodges. But we're also keeping in mind that Lake Hodges is an asset that we do not own. It's owned by the city of San Diego, and they're most likely going to be the ones to do the debt financing, and then we would have to reimburse them for the cost. So we've reached out to bond counsel to find out if we would even be able to issue a bond for Lake Hodges, and we're waiting to hear back from them.
Kieran, I think you have adjusted some setting that locks people out of the video, and since I have a voice, I have a face for radio, it's probably okay, but maybe you could look at that. I have a question about the drought conditions and how they are going to impact these scenarios that you've created.
Okay, we're getting there.
Okay.
So if it's okay with you, I'll just keep going, and then the last slide has to do with drought rates.
Okay.
Okay, so let's get into rates. And actually, this is related to Director Mosca's question, the third bullet here. So the slides show the proposed fiscal year 22 rates for the 3 scenarios that we put in front of you. And then the rates beyond fiscal year 2022 would increase by the revenue adjustment for each scenario. So in other words, we're not showing you 3 years rates. We're showing you what the rates would be next year, but then they would just go up according to the percentage for each revenue scenario. So if you choose scenario 1, they simply go up 6.5%. And then Jonathan, can you do me a favor? And if maybe we can answer Director Mosco's question a little bit better, can you check in the model while I'm presenting here? What did we assume for the out years for all of these scenarios? And maybe either let me know or send me a note, or you can let all of us know. Okay.
Okay, I'll do that.
Thank you. So here we have the bi-monthly meter service charges, and the column on the left here shows your current fixed charges by meter size. Okay, and then we have the 3 different scenarios, scenario 1, 2, and 3. And as you can see, scenario 1, the fixed charge for a 5/8 or 3/4 inch meter would go from 45 and change to 47 and change, to 47 and to the mid 47s, and then the high 47s for your smallest meters. Okay. I'll just give you a second to look at that in case you are interested in the higher meter sizes. The majority of your meters are down here. You have mostly single family residential customers. So the majority of your meters are down in these lower numbers here, lower meter sizes.
We can't see what you're pointing to, so maybe you could say the number.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought my cursor was.
Oh, there. Okay, I see it now.
Cursor? Okay.
That's the majority of meter sizes is 5/8.
Yeah, these guys here, 5/8 and 3/4. Then we have private fire charges by meter size. And so the 1-inch meters are going up a little bit, and then the bigger meters are going down a little bit. And that's primarily because there are more private fire connections in this study compared to the last study. And so I don't think anyone has complained thus far about rates going down, so I wouldn't necessarily say that's a bad thing. But when you divide by when the denominator goes up, when you have more customers, that lowers the cost for everyone. So that's why they're going down a little bit. And then in this slide, we have the commodity rates for each scenario. So the commodity rates are a rate that customers pay in dollars per HCF. HCF stands for 100 cubic feet, and 100 cubic feet is equal to 748 gallons. So these are all your single family customers. Here you have single family ag, single family commercial. They have the same tier breakpoints as before. This shows their current rates, and then these are the rates for each different scenario. And you don't have to worry too much about doing math in your head, because we're going to take a look at the bill impacts for your average customer for each class after this.
Okay, yeah, sorry, through the chair, if I could just ask. So yeah, it's hard for me to understand like what this means, because people don't ever pay for one. Like if you just look at tier one, $3.19, like how many do the people, like that doesn't mean anything to me.
Yeah, I think it will be a little more meaningful when we do the bill impacts, because we're going to show you an average customer and a median customer. We're going to show you what it means for their bill.
Okay.
But for now, I'm just showing you the rates, and then we'll show you what it means for bills. So just to finish up your other classes, you have multifamily here, and the rates for each scenario. And then you have your other classes: commercial, institutional, landscape, construction, and recycled water. And I should mention that in recycled water, you currently have 4 different rates, and what we're recommending a uniform rate. So depending on the scenario, of course, we're recommending a uniform rate for all water use, no matter what, whether you're irrigation or landscape or a public customer. It would be $5.41 if you chose scenario 1. And so
why do we have a why does that vary by class? Is that why wasn't it uniform before?
I think it may be because in the past you've a lot of agencies set recycled water based on policy. So they say recycled water will be at a discount to potable of say 10 or 20%. So you have those classes in potable, and the city probably just took 10 or 20% of those classes and created a recycled rate. You see what I'm saying? It just took 10% off all those classes. But as your rate consultant, we're a little bit sometimes maybe overly paranoid about litigation when it comes to rates, and your rates need to be based on your costs. And you need to have a reason. For example, why is ag paying one rate and then, landscape is paying another rate? You have to have a reason for that. And because you get your water from San Alejo Joint Powers Authority, usually that reason is based on peaking costs.
But our recycled water.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, your recycled water. They own the system, and they own the distribution system. So you just pay for the water. And there really isn't anything you could point to as to why one rate is different from another. And so that's why we're recommending a uniform rate, is just, in case anyone asks, why is my rate different than another? That may cause us to do a bit of a tap dance, and we don't want to do a tap dance.
Have you made that recommendation in years previous?
Last time we didn't do recycled rates, actually, in our previous rate studies. All we did was potable. Okay, so the most important one is bill impacts. What does this mean for your customers? And in this slide, we have 3 up at the top. If I can just get my cursor to work with me, here we go. We have 3 different single family residence customers. This number is your median, or is it mode? I believe it's your mode customers. So in other words, you send out the most bills for 12 HCF. So you can say most customers' bills will go from 92 and change to 95 and change for scenario 1, 96 and change for scenario 2, and high 96 for scenario 3. That is your most common customer. We also have your average customer. And as you know, average is a bit of a, your high water users skew that average, right? So that doesn't necessarily mean most of your customers use 24. Most of your customers use 12, but the average is 24. So for your average customer, the bill will go $156 to 170 and change, 170 change, and 171 and change for the average customer. And lastly, we put a high water user there just so you can see what their bill impact would be. And this is for a 3/4 inch meter. Okay, and then, so that's single family customers. And then you have your other customers, single family ag, single family commercial. I think you have 23 single family agricultural customers, single family commercial. It's right here, single family commercial. You have nine of those customers. And then multifamily ag, you have 5. Multifamily commercial, you have 5. Compared to single family residents up here, you have 9,300 customers. So the bulk of your customers are up here where I'm circling. Okay, so let's do the remainder of the classes. Here we have ag commercial classes, and their bill would go, in the mid 500s to the upper 500s. Institutional, landscape, construction, and then recycled water. So before I move on to drought rates, maybe I'll just pause here, and if you don't have any questions, I'll move on to drought rates.
I have a quick question, Chair.
Go ahead.
So combining the recycled rates, we're still having recycled rates be less than potable to encourage people to switch, like HOA's landscaping in that, right? I just want to make sure we're not losing that in any of these scenarios.
Yes, in fact, the average discount to potable it varies a little bit every year, but it's somewhere around the upper teens to about 20% discount to potable. So
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so drought rates. First, just a couple of notes about drought rates. So drought rates are an option that the board could implement. They would be noticed in your public hearing notice. So you would spell out if there's a drought, this is exactly what the district could do, and you would lay out your drought stages and how the rates would go up in each drought stage. And the reason for drought rates is because your revenue decreases as customers cut back consumption, but most of your costs to operate the system remain. Now, of course, you buy less water in a drought, so we've accounted for that. We've accounted for the fact that you are going to save a little bit of money, so we deduct that during a drought, right? And the board can implement drought rates to recover fixed costs. And the drought stages that you'll see in the next slide are based on the Urban Water Management Plan. And historically, I understand that the district has not implemented stage 1 drought rates, but to my understanding, you've used that rate stabilization reserve that you're funding. And this is actually quite common, is that during a stage 1 drought, the district or the water purveyor uses rate stabilization reserves first, and then moves on to a drought rate if necessary. And then lastly, I'm sure you know this, San Diego County is not one of the counties that the governor recently declared to be in a drought. And your staff sent us a report that said that the county as a general has been investing in supply reliability, along with a continued emphasis on water use efficiency, means the San Diego region has sufficient water supplies for multiple dry years. So I just want you to know that drought rates are an option to have in your back pocket should you need them, should your revenue decrease substantially during a drought. And then this table shows quite a few numbers, but I think I'll just point you to the last one, which is line 4. You can see percentages there that would be applied to all of your commodity rates that we just reviewed in the prior slides. So all your commodity rates, for example, if we look at a stage 2 drought, if I can make my cursor work, yeah, here we go. So stage 2 drought, you would have the option to increase all your commodity rates by 19%, and so on for each stage. So stage 3, 35%, stage 4, 53%, and so on. And the way we do this is we estimate how much water people would cut back during a drought. We estimate how much water you would save during a drought. We net the two, and then we apply that. We calculate a percentage to make you whole, so to speak, to make sure you recover your remaining expenses.
President Kranz, if I could inject a question here, please.
Yep.
I was curious about what our policy is or has been in the past. I heard you present that in the past we haven't activated the drought rates. We've taken the money needed from our reserves. What is our policy? Do we have a policy then about when we do, if we do activate drought rates?
I can take that question. What we on the water contingency plan, water shortage contingency plan, the stage 1 is actually voluntary measures that our customers have to take care of. There are six stages as part of that. From stage 2 to stage 6, it becomes mandatory, and that's why on stage 1 we have not been enforcing any of the penalties or the increased rate for drought. But beginning on stage 2, and my understanding that the city or the district back in 2016 did do that. There you can jump in if you would like to, and we charged an additional 8 or 10% at the time during that drought when stage 2 was on. Blair, any more?
Yes, we did implement drought rates, and then the governor did implement the 25% reduction mandatory, and I believe we had 2 drought rate percentages of increase. So we have implemented them in the past.
And so that would be our policy moving forward, it sounds like, is what you're saying, Usam.
Yes, it's actually part of the urban water management plan,
Okay,
water shortage contingency plan, and everything is laid down of how much and when and what is the steps that needs to be taken at each and every stage.
Appreciate it, thank you.
Jonathan, did you have a chance to look at the out-year revenue adjustments for our scenarios? Do you have any information on that?
Yeah, so if we had a 6.5% increase, I would keep the 6.5 through the entire study period. So 5 years of 6.5.
Okay, thank you. So in other words, if it's 6.5, we assume 6.5 for the full 5 years and 7 and so on. So thanks, Jonathan. Okay, so lastly, I think it may be best to, this is our last slide, and maybe I turn it back over to Mary for feedback on where to go from here.
Thank you, Steve. So the next steps would be basically in the past, we've had a rate subcommittee, which this time this board opted not to have. And that's why we're presenting this for the first time to the full board. And we're hoping that we'll receive your feedback on the scenarios that have been presented. And then depending on what it is you direct staff to do, we're hoping to come back next month at the June meeting and give you a final presentation of what the proposed rates would be or rate increases would be. We would also then request permission to send out a Prop 218 notice, which is required by law to send to all the ratepayers in the district, informing them that their rates will be going up and by whatever percentage that the board would want to approve. And then there would be a 45-day period during which we would get feedback from the public or from our ratepayers. They would have the opportunity to send in their protests or contact us and let us know how they feel about the rate increase. And then we would come back, since we're dark in July, so August would be the time when we would actually have a public hearing with all the feedback from the public and hopefully adopt the rates, or depending on how many protests or protests we've received, then we would make a determination, the board would make a determination whether they want to adopt the rates or not.
Okay, thank you. Any board members? Vice President Blakespear.
Yes, thank you. Did we consider anything less than 6.5%?
We haven't till now, but we could if that were your direction. But I guess I would just get everyone to realize that if we consider something less than 6.5%, here you're not reaching your green. So you probably would have to cut back a little bit on capital, or maybe do something with your pension, maybe lower your pension. So we absolutely can do it. Just know that as looking at this graph here, you're not reaching your green. So obviously if we did less, then you would probably want to cut back a little bit on capital.
Yeah, I mean, when I look at this graph, I see that the data we know is 2021, where we're basically overcapitalized. And so these are all projections into the future, and there's just a certain amount of uncertainty that's just obvious. And so the idea of raising rates 6.5% for the next 5 years, right? That you're saying 6.5% would be for each year.
Yes. But you're doing it for 3 years. Don't forget, not for 5 years. You would set it for 3 years.
Okay, so it wouldn't go out to 2026.
Right. But we're just showing you out to 2026 for planning purposes, but you would only set rates up until 2024.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I feel that we need to commit to that kind of a rate increase at this point. I guess that's what I would say. And I definitely would be unwilling to support something that says that we're claiming the authority to raise rates by 115% given certain drought categories. And at that extreme situation, I think we would be reconsidering a lot of the operational aspects of the water district as well as the capital projects. And so that's definitely not something I could support.
Board Member Lyons.
Thank you, President Kranz. My gut feeling is aligned with Vice President Blakespear. When I first was looking at the increase, I also wondered, why did we not consider an increase less than 6.5%? And I suspect it may be because something you said, Steve, at the beginning of your presentation, where you said that the revenue decrease was very conservative. So I get that that's a choice to project based on conservative revenue, but I'd be curious to understand better whether that projection of revenue being conservative is aligned with how other municipalities are projecting their revenue. Is this a trend more widely predicted, more than in our municipal area? And perhaps I'd understand the rates, the low rate you're suggesting better if I understand what went into your choice of the reduction of revenue being very conservative. It looks very conservative to me. So that's where my question lies. And I'm not sure I was able to glean that well enough today from this presentation. Perhaps there's some follow-up information that would shed light on that. Thank you.
Board Member Mosca?
So I think that what I've heard so far from my colleagues are some really good comments, and hopefully, you know, in the past we've had subcommittees and we've been able to kind of dive into this a bit more, and so we don't have a subcommittee that's been working on this, and so hopefully what we can do is come back with more information to make sure people are satisfied. I think that based on the data and information that I've seen so far, and being that we're a very small district, I think that that the scenarios presented are reasonable scenarios, and I think that you know, when we look toward the future in terms of Lake Hodges and the potential liability there, you know, and then also just kind of trying to preserve debt capacity. You know, I think that these scenarios are fairly reasonable. You know, I guess the only other question could be other additional funds from the state, but it doesn't. I mean, we're not really. You know, we don't have a ginormous capital improvement program, so it doesn't appear that that's going to offset a lot. And I know in the last rate study, we did drop some of our reserve levels. I think we even kind of dropped some of the replacement reserves. And so I just think that we want to be careful that we're not basically passing off to ratepayers in the future just the need for a larger increase than even what the scenarios are painting at this point. And so I'm, you know, very much interested in hearing more information and more information that, you know, really responds to some of the points that have been made. But I do think that based on what I've seen, that these are reasonable scenarios, and, you know, and we have gone with that kind of moderate level in the past. I'm not wanting to back down from the pension liability that we're paying. I mean, that was one of the reasons why we did kind of start to move up, is because we decided we're going to amortize that over 15 years and kind of pay that down. And I think that that's a good policy because it's going to save the ratepayers in the future. So anyways, I think I've kind of given enough information. I think that, you know, the scenarios that have been presented are reasonable. And, you know, the moderate approach has been what we've gone with in the past. So
I'm a little sensitive to this notion of increasing rates coming out of the pandemic, and there just have been the economic turmoil is significant. So while when you look at the bills at the back of this presentation, there aren't significant jumps. I just think that any jump is a little bit concerning. But in the meantime, I recognize the financial imperative as well. So I wonder if there'd be an appetite for a couple of board members to work more closely with our consultant to look at some graphs that looked at different lower rate increases and how that might affect it. Is that something that we might have a couple of people willing to spend that time? Because not having a subcommittee is part of the challenges that we end up here, and we're kind of feeling like I'm not comfortable with these particular rate increase scenarios. So,
Mr. President, I think you're onto something, and perhaps it should be a couple of people that are uncomfortable with the data presented and the information presented.
Board Member Ryan?
Yeah, President Kranz, I was just raising my hand
Oh,
based on your request,
okay.
because I'd really like to understand this better, and I think no better way to do that than to invest some time in it. So if you're going that direction, I would help there.
Steve, is that a scenario that would work for you to work with a couple of board members to look at some different, punch in different scenarios and see what that does to the various lines and the various categories?
Absolutely. We can go through all the assumptions, CIP assumptions, pension assumptions, and work together. We do it quite often, actually. So absolutely.
Kelly, is that something you're interested in doing?
Sure, I'd be happy to do that.
Okay, so do we need a motion to create that ad hoc subcommittee?
I think we can have consensus.
Yeah, I think the consensus would be better.
Pardon me?
Great.
I think consensus would be better because it's not really a formal formation of a committee. It's more like two people to work on something.
Yep, so I hear consensus. Isam, is that working for you? You understand where we're going and what we're doing?
Yes, for sure. That would be very helpful for us too.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Joy and Kelly, and we look forward to getting this back. And I think the goal is to continue with the idea of preparing at 218 if the subcommittee is comfortable. Is that correct? Is that the consensus? Any objections to that? So next meeting we would have some scenarios that we would end up comfortable picking one and moving forward with the 218?
I think that's a good process where they would flesh it out a bit more and you know, kick the tires and come up with see if there's a potential for more scenarios, and then we could start the 218 process with the next one.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Steve and team. And with that, we will move on to item 10B, which is a public hearing regarding the San Diego Water District's 2020 Urban Water Management Plan and amend the 2015 Urban Water Management Plan to include reduction to the Bay Delta Reliance Appendix. And that brings us to Senior Civil Engineer Noel.
Chair, could I just ask a quick question? Is this an item that we can easily kick? Because now it's 6:23 and people are waiting for the council meeting.
Something tells me this. Joy, did you have questions on this item?
No, I didn't.
I think we can ask Blair to make a very accelerated presentation.
Yeah. President Krantz, yeah, it's like, because it was a noticed public hearing, we have to open the public hearing, hear all the public, and then close it. We can really brief in our presentation, if that's okay.
Okay, I'm opening the public hearing.
Oh. Can you see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Then this is a public hearing for the Urban Water 2020 Management Plan. Background again, this was brought to you last month. Every 5 years, urban water suppliers need to complete the plan, submit it to the state. So the plan just goes through and ensures that there's water supplies adequate for the future and reports back on the last year's demands. Tonight, we recommend that you take public comment and advise us of any changes to the plan. We want you to adopt the plan with those changes if you have some. We also have the water supply shortage response plan, which is an ordinance which will modify the administrative code to add that plan to the code. And then we are still doing a resolution to amend the 2015 plan to include the Day Delta Reliance. So in June, of course, we hired Woodward Curran to prepare the plan, and Sally will be presenting the plan. Sally, can you share your screen?
Yes. All right, so has everybody seen the slides?
Yep.
Great. So I will go quickly through these slides. I know that the board, you've heard this information before, but we want to let the public also hear it, but respecting time. So we are presenting on the 2020 Urban Water Management Plan, the Water Shortage Contingency Plan, and that 2015 addendum on Delta Reliance. As Blair mentioned, the urban water management plans are water resource planning documents that are looking at supply reliability and projected demands and supplies. They're updated every 5 years, and per the legislation, the 2020 urban water management plans are due to DWR by July 1st, 2021. They're required to be eligible for state funding, and it follows a highly prescribed format from DWR. So the contents are dictated by DWR. Urban water management plans include historical, current, and projected demands and supplies over a 25-year planning horizon, so 2020 to 2025 in this version. This year, we're demonstrating compliance with the SBX 77 20 by 2020 water use targets. We're evaluating our supply reliability under normal and drought year conditions. We're looking at the water conservation measures that have been implemented and are available to the district if needed. And then updating the water shortage contingency plan, which addresses short-term supply shortfalls. There's 10 chapters of your plan. They're listed here. We'll be walking through them. In the next slides, we'll combine some of the more general sections. The meat of your plan is really chapters 4, system demand, 6 system supplies, and 7 water supply reliability, which is where you're looking at your water, your reliability analysis. So your first 3 chapters, introduction, plan preparation, and system description, provide an overview of your system and overview of your district. We'd note that we did complete your urban water management plan in coordination with the Water Authority as your regional wholesaler. Your SBX 77 compliance, we've done it both individually and in coordination with a regional alliance that you're a part of, which is the Olivenhain Municipal Water District, Rincon del Diablo Municipal Water District, Vallecillos Water District. We're showing here your population, so relatively minimal population growth, about 3,500 or so people between 2020 and 2045 based off of Sandag's analysis. Your demands are shown here. Your demands are based on modeling that was completed by the Water Authority, which includes historical water use, household income, anticipated land use changes, and population projections, active and passive conservation measures. The Water Authority also incorporates data from Sandag's Series 14 projections, which is what they use for the population and employment information. What you'll see here in the demands, your total demands are going from about 6,100 acre feet up to about 7,300 acre feet in 2045. This is about 10 to 20% lower than what was projected for these years in your 2015 urban water management plan. So just want to note, it is showing a reduction in overall water use from previous projections. SBX 77 compliance, that's the 20 by 2020 reduction. In 2015, you set your baseline target, or you set your baseline and your 2020 target. So we wanted to highlight here that you achieved your target. Your target was 151 gallons per capita per day. And you achieved that in 2020 with 129 gallons per capita per day. So 15% lower than your target. We also wanted to highlight that even though your water use is growing over time, you're still projected to stay below your 2020 target of 151 through the future of the planning scenario. On the supply side, you'll see the supply breakdown between what we're projecting your purchases from the Water Authority would be, the water that's available to you from Lake Hodges, and then recycled water from San Alejo JPA. I did want to mention that we took a conservative approach with your demands and supplies, which is why you'll see the recycled water number stays at 700 acre feet into the future. We just wanted to be conservative to make sure that there was sufficient potable water planned for in your document.
Sally, I noticed that this slide was in our presentation last month. Are there slides that are new to this presentation, or are they the same as last month?
They're mostly the same. We've consolidated and simplified the slides to be a little less.
Okay, maybe you could accelerate through them.
Sure. All right. So on the supply reliability side, just the highlight here is that when looking at your supplies and demands under the normal year conditions, single dry year conditions, and multi-dry year conditions, which is 5 consecutive dry years into the future, that there's sufficient supply to meet demand, so you're 100% reliable in our projections. Your water shortage contingency plan was updated to 6 levels of shortages. That's 10% shortage through over 50% shortage with associated water use restrictions. We listed out your regional conservation measures that you have implemented to help conserve water. So they're just kind of listed here. And then on your Delta reliance, this is required not under the Urban Water Management Plan Act, but by the Delta Plan regulatory policy. So we're including it as an appendix here in your 2020 Urban Water Management Plan. And then per the requirements of the Delta Plan, we are recommending an addendum to your 2015 Urban Water Management Plan that just incorporates this analysis that demonstrates the region is reducing its reliance on the Delta. And then here's our timeline. This is our public hearing on those items. We're looking for adoption today so that we can submit in June. By June 18th, we'll submit all of these documents to the state by the deadline established.
So Kathy, do I need to get disclosures?
You can, I don't believe so. This is not like an appeal. So we open the public hearing for public comment. We have none. So we can close the public hearing.
I will close the public hearing. Are there any board member questions?
President, I'll move the staff's recommendation, and I'll just also say thank you to Sally and Blair for noting the potable reuse, the potential for 2,000 acre feet, which I think is conservative as well. So thank you.
Okay, board member Lines.
I will go ahead and second the motion, and I want to thank Sally and Blair and the team for responding to the questions I had along the way, particularly about the recycled water. Thank you.
Are you ready to start voting? Board member Hinsey?
Yes.
Board member Lines?
Yes.
Board member Mosca?
Yes.
Vice President Blakespear?
Yes.
President Kranz?
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you, Blair and Sally and team.
Thank you.
Glad we got that taken care of. There are no informational items. Are there any board member reports pursuant to AB 1234? Hearing none. General manager information update report. We'll save that for next meeting if you don't mind.
Yes.
And we are adjourned, and thank you all very much. Are we taking a break?
I'll just need a couple of minutes so that I can close out San Diego Water and start city council.
Okay. All right, let's see. We have, looks like we have everybody. So we have yes, there we go. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started.
Okay.
This is the regular city council meeting, calling this meeting to order. And it is Wednesday, May 19, 2021. It's 6:36. Getting started a little bit late here because our water district meeting ran over. So may we please have a roll call?
Yes, Mayor. Councilmember Hinsey,
Here?
Councilmember Lyons,
Here?
Councilmember Mosca. Do you see Councilmember Mosca?
Here.
He's there. Deputy Mayor Kranz
Here.
and Mayor Blakespear.
Here.
Record will show that all members of the city council are present.
Okay, thank you. I invite you to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, next we have our special presentation and proclamation. So this is a proclamation declaring National Public Works Week. And I have a proclamation here, which reads, it's called Stronger Together. So whereas public works professionals focus on infrastructure, facilities, and services that are of vital importance to sustainable and resilient communities and to the public health, high quality of life, and well-being of the people of Encinitas and in California. And whereas these infrastructure, facilities, and services could not be provided without the dedicated efforts of public works professionals, who are engineers, managers, and employees from state and local government and the private sector, who are responsible for rebuilding, improving, and protecting our nation's transportation, water supply, water treatment, and solid waste systems, public buildings, and other structures and facilities essential for our citizens. And whereas it is in the public interest for the citizens, civic leaders, and children in the city of Encinitas to gain knowledge and to maintain a progressive interest and understanding in the importance of public works and public works programs in their respective communities. And whereas over the past year, the city of Encinitas public works staff has modified operational practices to continue providing uninterrupted, excellent customer service to the people of Encinitas during the COVID-19 pandemic. And whereas the year 2021 marks the 61st annual celebration of National Public Works Week, sponsored by the American and Canadian Public Works Association. So now therefore I, Catherine Blakespear, Mayor of the City of Encinitas, along with all City Council members, do hereby proclaim the week of May 16 through 22 as National Public Works Week in the City of Encinitas, and urge all residents to join with representatives of the American Public Works Association and government agencies in activities, events, and ceremonies designed to pay tribute to our public works professionals, engineers, managers, and employees, and to recognize the substantial contributions they make to protecting our nation's health, safety, and quality of life. And so I do want to just say personally that the things that we are so proud of in the city come from you. So the public works professionals build all of these incredible projects like our Acadia Streetscape, which is on our agenda tonight, and all sorts of other things in the city that we then use and residents use, and it creates this incredible high quality of life that we enjoy, and sometimes we don't take a moment to recognize it. So I'm happy to do this proclamation, and I see you, Tim, you're here to say a few words. I'm happy that you could join us, so I'll hand it over to you.
Yes, thank you very much. I apologize, you're probably over stimulated with public works things after your last meeting, so I'll be brief. But good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the council. Tim Dismura, your interim Public Works Director. On behalf of the entire department, I wanted to thank you for recognizing the work that the department does. We've prepared a brief video that we'd like to share with you. It's actually a video we prepared for the elementary school students and pass out hard hats, but we'd like to share it with you this evening to give you an idea of what we do. Karen, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Blakespear and Council. We take pride in serving the residents and businesses of Encinitas and anticipate a very bright future as we move forward stronger together. Now, we would like to take a few minutes of your time and share what we do with you. So what is Public Works? Public Works provide all the necessary and vital elements for a community to exist and function properly and safely. This includes roads, sewer systems, buildings, water, trash collection, and much, much more. Oftentimes, these resources get overlooked because they are just a part of your everyday life. But there is a team of people who make sure that these services are provided to our community every day, and I would like to introduce you to that team. The Public Works Administration Division provides management direction and administrative support to the department's operational divisions, the Cardiff Sanitary Division, and the Encinitas Sanitary Division. Administrative support services include budgeting, purchasing, special studies and programs, administering contracts and grants, work projects, capital improvement projects, and other related tasks. This division also manages the city's solid waste, recycling, and household hazardous waste programs and contracts. The Facilities Maintenance Division is responsible for ongoing maintenance of the Civic Center, 6 fire stations, 2 permanent lifeguard towers, the Encinitas Community and Senior Center, City Library, Public Works Facility, and park and beach facilities. City staff, along with various contract services, provide building and grounds maintenance. The Clean Water Program serves to protect and enhance the quality of local surface waters, including creeks, lagoons, and beaches along the Pacific Ocean through stormwater pollution prevention activities. The main function of the program include water quality monitoring, construction inspection and enforcement, resident response and the clean water hotline management, public outreach, and education. The program also oversees the city's gas-powered leaf blower ban and the Plastics Initiative, which include the ban on single-use plastic utensils and single-use plastic bags. The Fleet Maintenance Division is responsible for all city and water district vehicle and equipment purchasing and maintenance. Maintenance is provided by in-house personnel or outside contractors when necessary. The city currently maintains approximately 154 vehicles that range in types from electric passenger vehicles to fire trucks. The Street Maintenance Division provides continuous maintenance of the city's right-of-way and other related infrastructure. The maintenance and repair helps ensure the city streets are safe and accessible to everyone using them. This includes 172 miles of roads where they repair potholes and other types of defects in the asphalt. It also includes over 350 miles of sidewalk and 10,000 traffic signs. They clean drainage channels, ditches, and flood control basins to ensure our storm systems function properly and minimal trash reaches the ocean. They provide emergency and preventative storm flooding response and vegetation removal along the side of the road. The division oversees street sweeping operations, pavement striping, and the maintenance of over 3,000 streetlights. Additionally, the division oversees and participates in the ongoing proactive care of around 13,000 trees in the city right-of-way. This includes trimming, planting, and the removal of dead and diseased trees. Along with the Wastewater Collection Division in the San Diego Water District, Street Maintenance has a staff member on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to respond to emergencies within the city. The San Diego Water District provides potable water for both public health and safety. Their administrative team provides customer service and cashiering for over 11,000 customers. The operational team provides maintenance on 175 miles of pipeline, 2 reservoirs, 1 pump station, and 11,800 water meters. They also respond to hit hydrants, water main repairs and leaks, hit water services, and valve replacements. The Wastewater Maintenance Division provides routine sanitary sewer collection services and below-ground storm drain maintenance in Encinitas. Maintenance services include cleaning approximately 123 miles of sewer lines, clearing stoppages, repairing breaks on a routine basis, and responding to emergencies as needed. Below ground storm drain maintenance consists of cleaning and maintaining 1,789 storm drain boxes and approximately 65 miles of underground pipes. Also, cleaning, debris, and clearance of drainage systems after storm events and preventing standing water issues in the city right-of-way areas. Most toilets in the city of Encinitas are connected to the sewer system, and we make sure it's working properly. So remember, no wipes down the pipes. Just like the rest of the world, over the last year, we in the Public Works Department have had to adjust our operations, our communication styles, and the way we interact with the public. We have taken every necessary precaution to ensure the safety of our employees, the public, all while continuing the services that we provide. During the last year, City Hall was closed to the public and employees were telecommuting. We used that time to perform some much needed renovations to the Civic Center. Well, that pretty much sums it up. Thank you for watching.
Well, thank you, Tim. That was a great video, and you just realize how much work is being done. I mean, it's just stunning. You know, so many things just happen: water and wastewater and roads, and they just function. And we just think so little about what it takes to keep that happening. And it's really the core of what cities do. And so it's great. You know, that video is really great. And you could see, it's nice to see all the staff employees and have them wave. And you could see how many of them were in masks. And I know it was a really difficult year for you and the team, and everybody just really leaned in and stepped up and said, we can do this, and we'll work in shifts and we'll distance and all the things needed, because they're basically essential workers. And so as essential workers, they did what needed to be done. And I know I express everybody's feeling that we're so grateful to have such a dedicated staff, and the commitment that comes from the top all the way down is there. And we are just so grateful for all the employees at the city who do that really hard work every day. And it's great that you also included the little message about do not flush your wipes down the drain, because I sit on 2 wastewater boards and that message comes up repeatedly, but it can be hard to get that out there because it says flushable on the package. So it's great that you put that in the video.
Thank you for those comments. We appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Okay. So now we're on to our oral communications.
Okay, we have 8. And just a reminder to our speakers, you will have 3 minutes. When I call your name, make sure to unmute your microphone. Our first speaker is Kathleen Kastner.
Hi, can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you, council members and mayor, for your time. My name is Kathleen Kastner, and I'm an Encinitas resident. I'm here to ask for your support of a resolution that would encourage food corporations with locations in Encinitas to come into compliance with Proposition 12's cage-free requirements for eggs and pork now. I have met with former Councilmember Hubbard and Councilmember Lyons on this issue. In 2018, California voters passed a statewide ballot initiative called Proposition 12 with an overwhelming majority. In San Diego County, Proposition 12 received 61.5% of the vote. Proposition 12 ensures that calves used for veal, mother pigs, and egg-laying hens aren't locked in tiny cages, and that by the end of 2021, eggs sold in the state must come from birds in cage-free housing systems, and pork cannot come from facilities that used crammed gestation crates for mother pigs. California's ban on caging calves used for veal went into effect on January 1st, 2020. Compliance with Proposition 12 now is critical since a rush in the final weeks of 2021, when Prop 12's eggs and pork mandates go into effect, could put companies at risk of not having enough product. Coming into compliance prior to the last possible moment would also ensure a smooth transition for retailers and consumers. And it would allow suppliers time to plan ahead and keep costs down for customers. Some of the largest food companies in the country with locations in Encinitas, including Target, Vons, Taco Bell, Chipotle, and others, made pledges even before Prop 12 to eventually go cage-free. Prop 12 is a modest move in the right direction and is a part of the nationwide push to help end factory farming abuses. Passing a resolution would demonstrate that Encinitas is in support of the local benefits of Prop 12, including food safety, public health, and the promotion of the humane treatment of animals. For these reasons, I kindly encourage you to pass a resolution calling on food companies with locations in Encinitas to come into compliance with Proposition 12's cage-free mandates now. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Kate Brindle. Kate, you can start when ready.
Thank you for considering my comments. My name is Kate Brindle, and I'm a public policy specialist with the Humane Society of the United States. And on behalf of the Humane Society of the United States, I'm here to kindly ask the Council to please enact a resolution regarding California's Proposition 12. This resolution would encourage food corporations with locations in Encinitas to come into compliance with Proposition 12's cage-free requirements for eggs and pork as soon as possible, like Kathleen mentioned. A similar resolution was passed in Berkeley, Oakland, and most recently Los Angeles, demonstrating the importance of Encinitas also calling on food companies to implement Prop 12's requirements now. Prop 12 passed in a landslide vote in 2018 with a phase-in date for compliance at the end of 2021. Developing a resolution in support of Prop 12's implementation now is critically important for the environment and public health. Confined animal feeding operations, or CAFOs as they're known as, pack enormous numbers of animals into tiny areas by confining egg-laying hens, mother pigs, and calves used for veal in cages so restrictive they are barely able to move. This produces extremely concentrated amounts of waste that wreaks havoc on the environment and public health. The prestigious Pew Commission on Industrial Farm Animal Production released the results of a 2.5-year investigation into the problems associated with CAFOs. And the commission found that the CAFO system often poses unacceptable risks to public health, the environment, and the welfare of the animals themselves. Cage-free conditions and encouraging food companies to comply with Prop 12's cage-free mandates as soon as possible would be an important step towards lessening the environmental harm as well as animal suffering caused by CAFOs. The intensive confinement of farm animals also risks disease, which in the age of COVID-19 is something we cannot afford to allow to continue. The recent United Nations report on preventing future pandemics warns that the extreme confinement of farm animals is one of the top 2 risk factors for zoonotic disease emergence. By supporting a resolution like the one HSUS and board member Lines have discussed, the Council would demonstrate that they stand against the disastrous impacts of CAFOs and the intensive confinement of farm animals. For these reasons, I ask that the Council please adopt a resolution encouraging food corporations with locations in Encinitas to come into compliance with Prop 12's cage-free requirements for eggs and pork as soon as possible. Thank you so much for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Gerald Kessler.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, hang on just one second here. Okay, here we go. The word Encinitas means hills of live oak. Isn't this ironic that we, as fellow Encinitas residents, are fighting for our Torrey Pines grove of trees and over 200 other trees that will be chopped down if the Staver project is allowed to build 31 homes based on the density bonus AB 2345. This does not work based on the landscape that we have in coastal Encinitas. Not all land is buildable. This property is a jewel with its rolling hills and landscapes. The trees can be seen for miles. It has such potential. It also has a beautiful historical home on the property that was built in 1938. That the property is loaded up with pesticides and toxins from the years of the greenhouses on them. The current hydrology report provided to us and the city is not accurate and has no proper way of dealing with any of these toxins. By putting 31 homes on top of the property, all the runoff will go to all the neighbors' homes and to the ocean. There is no current accurate plan to deal with the drainage and the runoff of these homes. I would also like to mention the Staver family has been a longtime resident of the community and always has been stewards of the land. This is another reason that it saddens all the local neighbors. I asked the city to take a look at these laws and how they impact our precious land. And let us remember what the meaning of Encinitas is: hill of live oaks, not hill of homes. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Chris Wade.
Thank you. My name is Chris Wade. I'm here today to share some information with the council relating to marijuana businesses. I'm recommending the city council watch an important San Diego County virtual news conference on Thursday from 10 to 11 titled "Doctors Warn Cannabis Can Cause Serious Health Hazards." San Diego County Marijuana Initiative will introduce IASIC, the International Academy on the Science and Impact of Cannabis. The news conference will host 4 medical doctors discussing current cannabis-related trends in emergency and other medical settings, and make available reliable, peer-reviewed medical resources on the short and long-term consequences of cannabis use. IASIC, the International Academy on the Science and Impact of Cannabis, is a medical organization of doctors who educate on marijuana-based scientific and medical literature. IASIC is a nonpartisan and non-political group created to facilitate informed decisions when considering cannabis policy and law. The news conference will be based on the review of scientific evidence and concludes that public health effects of high-potency cannabis are harmful. These growing negative impacts further strain healthcare and addiction treatment resources to the extent that they are far surpass taxation revenues. This evidence-based information provided at this news conference should be thought-provoking to all cities and should give everyone pause as we consider moving forward with marijuana policies. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Annika Walden. Annika, you need to unmute your microphone.
Hello, can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, thank you for your patience. Good evening, everybody. I'm going to be actually pretty quick tonight. I'm just speaking in regards to Streetscape, the north portion of the project, and we are in favor of supporting staff's recommendation for the 3 roundabouts. We think that this project is a more comprehensive project and is a more holistic approach to the northern portion of the corridor, and we are strongly in favor of this, and we thank the City Council and City staff for moving forward with this project and seeking financing. Thank you so much for the time tonight.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Tyler James. Tyler, you can start when ready.
Good evening, this is Tyler James. I want to share with the City Council that San Diego is making changes to the probation department in the way that it handles justice-involved youth and their families. This will affect teenagers in Encinitas and across the county, with more than $205 million being spent on a new youth transition campus and partnerships with national experts on juvenile justice reform. The changes are part of a plan to rethink the way communities approach juvenile justice issues. I propose that we rethink it even further in the county and in Encinitas by reducing the number of teens who become justice involved. One way is by acknowledging the effect that marijuana use has on teenagers and taking steps to prevent it. A report from the Sandag Criminal Justice Clearinghouse looked at 20 years of data involving substance use by those under 18. The majority of arrestees identified marijuana as their drug of choice. 57% tested positive for pot, 58% said pot was the first drug they had tried, and 73% had vaped high THC concentrates. Science is clear that teens who use marijuana have a harder time controlling their emotions, have worse problem-solving skills, and lower academic motivation and performance. If these justice-involved teens had never tried marijuana, would they have made different decisions? Perhaps there wouldn't have been justice involved at all. Efforts to prevent youth marijuana use could be one of the best ways to have a positive outcome for justice-involved youth and their families. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Lynn Gilson. Lynn, can you unmute your microphone?
I'm sorry. There we go. Hi, I'm Lynn Gilson, and I want to start by saying that I'm excited about the Encinitas Solana Beach project that adds sand to the narrowing and eroding beaches from Beacons Beach southward to Swami's. However, I'd like to remind the City Council and everyone here tonight that there is still a significant amount of Encinitas beachfront that does not have a long-term beach maintenance plan. For example, approximately 23% of Encinitas' beach stretches from La Costa Ave to Acadia Boulevard, and it's not covered. So that means from the new Maria Resort southward to in front of Sea Bluffs through Grandview on down to Beacons Beach is not included in that project. And Swami's to Seaside is also left wanting. Now, obviously, the North Leucadia stretch includes the site of the tragic bluff collapse 2 summers ago. So I know that I don't really have to plead the case that this area has bad beach erosion, which has led to undercut bluffs. And once a bluff is undercut, the portion of the bluff that's not supported underneath will calve. That undercutting is your early warning system. And without studious beach maintenance, the bluff undercutting and collapses are going to continue to happen. Also, the elevation of the beach will continue to erode downward, which means that the beach will continue to narrow as the ocean is able to come up further and further on the beach. And so we'll start to lose our beach, more and more of it, and our beautiful surf sites will become mostly unusable. So I want to continue to stress that the uniqueness of Encinitas is its beaches. You know, I'm appreciative of everything else that goes on in this city. You know, things like Streetscape, though, with parking pods and things, a lot of them are for the business concerns. A lot of the residents here have chosen to live here for its kind of low-key beach vibe. And sure, we can drive to Moonlight and to Cardiff, but those beaches and parking areas are already crowded. And so to be quite frank, many of us want to know if we should sell our homes sooner rather than later, based on whether these beaches are going to be able to be maintained. And I think to lose a large portion of our beach, no matter where you live in Encinitas, is not something that Encinitas wants. Now, luckily, Jamie Timberlake was hired a couple years ago to shepherd the Encinitas Solana Beach Sand Nourishment Project, and she's looking into ways to address the issues. But as good as she is just one person. So we need everyone's commitment on this city council to address this issue. And I'm asking you to please give it your highest priority, because once you lose a beach, you don't get it back. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And then our final speaker is Robert Sluter, but I do not see him on. He is not present. So that does conclude oral communications.
Okay. Thank you. Councilmember Lyons.
Mayor Blakespear, I did have a comment on two of the speakers. Would now be an appropriate time?
Yes.
First, on the first two speakers representing Proposition 12 and a resolution, I would like to work with them to present a resolution for consideration to City Council. And I just wanted to follow up on their presentation by making that comment. And if there are other council members who are also interested, that would be great.
If someone wants to work together on that, you can. Okay, Councilmember Hinsey. So yes, just work together, and then you can present it to the city clerk, who will present it to me, and then present it to everybody.
Thank you. My second comment is on the last speaker about the long-term beach maintenance, and it made me think that it might be helpful to, if we have time in an upcoming agenda, to have a overview of what the city is doing with beach maintenance, beach replenishment. I just wanted to make that suggestion.
Yeah, that's a good upcoming agenda item, future agenda item.
Thank you.
Okay, good. Well, thank you. And thank you to the public for coming and participating tonight. We always appreciate hearing from you. Next, we will move on to the consent calendar. And I would actually like to pull item 8F on the Senior Commission Work Plan.
Actually,
Mayor, if we could just do the report from closed session really quickly.
You're right. I'm so sorry. Go ahead, City Attorney.
Okay, just really quickly, the council met in closed session just on one item. It was a significant exposure to litigation, and the city council met with the legal counsel to discuss that matter, but there are no reportable actions. And that concludes my report out from closed session.
Okay. City Clerk.
And then we move to changes to the agenda. There are no changes to the posted agenda. Consent calendar, we have public speaker on item 8G. And then Mara, you said 8F you were pulling?
Yes.
Okay.
Move the remainder of the consent calendar, absent 8F and 8G.
Second.
Start voting. Councilmember Hinsey?
Yes.
Councilmember Lyons?
Yes.
Councilmember Moscow?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Kranz?
Yes.
And Mayor Blakespear?
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously. We can move to item 8F. And there are no public speakers. So Mayor, this is your item.
Oh, okay. The senior commit. Okay, sorry. I thought it was the public.
No, that's okay.
Item. So this is an item on the Senior Commission work plan. And I just, I appreciate all the work the Senior Commission is doing and the staff is doing. I wanted to flag the issue of the senior dances and the importance of the senior dances when it comes to the programming that we offer in the city. So, I mean, as you may know, we offer our city facilities to our city programs first. So like if we have kids programs, which we have a lot of, and we have other programs, then those things have priority, and then community groups come second. And so I think the senior dances, if any of you have been to them, you see the huge number of seniors that participate and the really important benefit of gathering that we are providing in our senior center. So, you know, we do have, of course, a dedication to helping our seniors. And so I wanted to propose as part of the work plan that we consider working in a partnership with the Rotary and the volunteers. You also may notice that our volunteers of the year have been the people who organize the senior dances, to create that as an in-house program so that it has priority to use the facilities like between 12 and 2 when they would like to be able to have their senior dances instead of falling at the end of the line. So I wanted to modify this senior work plan from the commission to talk to my colleagues about that and ask for support to prioritize at a higher level the senior dances. Yes, go ahead, Councilmember Krantz.
I think Joy had her hand up first, I see.
Oh. Feel free to go ahead.
Okay, well, I was just going to say that, you know, this seems like one of those things that I'm not clear. Are you suggesting that the senior commission should consider it? Or I think that it's likely to get strong support here at the council, and maybe we should just direct staff to modify our policies accordingly.
That would actually be my preference. Yeah.
Okay. I would support that. I don't know if you need to make a motion. It's not on the agenda. I'm not sure how the city attorney and the city manager would like us to handle this.
I think you could just give direction on that. Right. Pam, I'm not sure what that works for me. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think if we just have consensus on this, I mean, I just want to emphasize that the point of this is to raise the priority. So I recognize that we work with a lot of really important community groups. I think we have had a series of kind of ongoing discussions with the senior dances about how to make that a higher priority, or whether it is, or why it's not, or this kind of thing. So the goal is to say this is a critical part of the programming, and in the same way that we offer junior lifeguards because it's important to us that kids can learn how to be a junior lifeguard, that we offer this as part of our senior programming. So, you know, my hope is this doesn't go into the black hole of like, well, yeah, we're just going to continue as is, that we are going to elevate this, because that's the point of talking about it here. So does the
Madam Mayor?
Yeah.
Madam Mayor, I just wanted to say that I think that I agree with you, and I think the key term here is elevate and prioritize, because I think that if it's already being done successfully somewhere else, we shouldn't essentially take it over or try to change it. We should just elevate it so that it's getting preference, and it's being looked at as on par with these other programs, and so it's getting the space and the priority it needs within our assets, like the community center. But we don't need to basically redo it or take it over.
Exactly. I completely agree with that. And if you look at other things that we do as a city, we partner with organizations like the environmental groups to put on EcoFest, or like the senior health days, or this kind of thing. Like there are a number of things where we don't take them over, but we have a collaborative relationship where we don't charge as much money. We have some support staff that's involved with it. You know, there's a process for doing that. And I would just like, instead of this being sort of outside of the city, I would like us to bring this inside more, and like the word elevate, to make that something that we see as a priority, and that we communicate that to the seniors who are using it, as well as the organizers. Yes, Deputy Mayor.
The only point I would make is that I think, I believe it was last holiday season, their regular dance night was on Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve, and it created a little bit of a problem with regard to staffing. And so, you know, I think part of the question regarding how we're going to elevate this is to possibly address, you know, at all costs, where we plan to bring in overtime staff or hire a contractor to work those events that the facility isn't open, because I do know that that this is a pretty important event for the seniors, and for good reason. It gives them the opportunity to socialize that in other instances they wouldn't. And so, the holiday situation isn't something that they can, it wasn't really, I think you probably all recall what we went through the last time that happened. So maybe as part of this process of elevating, we can consider that. And, I think that I appreciate you bringing this up, simply because the folks who put on this dance have been busting their ears for a long time, and it's well attended, and it's an important event, and the stress that comes with the questions that surround it are difficult for all of us to deal with. I don't want Sharon to have to type long emails like she has been. So anyhow, I think maybe the city manager, if she's got a sense of where we're headed, then we can get this back.
Okay, great. Well, it seems like there's consensus on that. And the city manager, do you feel like it's a clear message?
It is. I think that the group is, I don't think that they would like to have us take over the dance, and they actually receive the date and time that they have requested. So I'm not sure that there will be an interest, but I hear what you're saying in terms of elevating. They do have a dance on New Year's Eve. So I would have to hear more about Christmas Eve. I'm not going to make any promises about that.
And I mean, I'll just say that there's a lot of complexity in that. Obviously, we have our labor contracts. There are no cities that open their public facilities on those holidays where they're closed, because we looked into this last time. I think in some ways it's really working with them. Like maybe they could have their dance the day before New Year's, or the dance is not at midnight, it's like at noon.
No, so, it's on New Year's Eve, and it's during the early afternoon into the early evening. I think it's over by like 4:30. Okay. And I think that that's happened for several years, and I think it's really ingrained into the Parks and Recreation department. I think there has been a misunderstanding about COVID and reopening and what's allowed and what's not allowed, but I think that the staff has actually been very accommodating to this group. I think that there's just a lot of angst about reopening and what's going to happen when reopen occurs. That being said, we are happy to meet with the group and move forward and see if there are other things and ideas or metrics that we're not meeting. We're happy to meet with anybody about that.
Okay, great. So with that, I'll go ahead and move approval of the consent item.
Second, Mosca.
Sorry about that. Councilmember Hensy?
Yes.
Councilmember Lyons?
Yes.
Councilmember Mosca? Councilmember Mosca?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Deputy Mayor Kranz?
Yes.
And Mayor Blakespear?
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously. Then we move to item 8G, and our speaker is Mark Wilcox. Mark, you can start when ready.
There,
There you go.
I think I'm unmuted now.
We can hear you.
Okay. Good evening, Encinitas City Council. On behalf of public health educators and the people of Encinitas, we would like to make 2 points regarding the recent $275,702 grant to the city of Encinitas and Boys and Girls Clubs of San Diego, utilizing 2 Boys and Girls Clubs of San Diego clubhouses. The purpose of this grant will be to teach youth under the age of 18 skills and relevant information in cannabis prevention. 1, I would like to respectfully suggest it is unfortunate that this program is needed now more than ever, since Encinitas will have marijuana storefronts, cultivation, and manufacturing in our town. What an expensive taxpayer-funded project this is to reach a few children while the rest of Encinitas youth will be surrounded by these marijuana businesses and their predatory advertising. 2, the staff report says that 2 clubhouses are located in areas having a majority of youth who are at risk, low income, and within the immigrant population. While this is nice, it is important to recognize that the data recognizes that this is not the population of the youth who are using pot. Anglo young persons from mid to higher income families with access to discretionary income are more likely to consume pot. So I wonder where they will receive their marijuana information, probably from predatory and omniprevalent marijuana businesses, marketing, mailers, and billboards. How much wiser it would have been if Encinitas had fought off the aggressive marijuana industry's well-funded attempt to bring marijuana businesses to Encinitas. I would like to close with this recent statement in the Colorado Springs Gazette by Robert Corey, the original author behind Colorado's Prop 64. Quote, The current reality that I was too naive to anticipate 10 years ago is that commercialized marijuana was a for-profit, elitist, government-protected, privileged monopolistic industry that perpetuates itself, and its obscene profits would be detrimental to the public good and the planet Earth. End quote. Thank you.
Thank you. And we did have one other speaker on that, Becky Rapp, but I do not see her in attendance. So that does conclude speakers on this item.
Okay, I'll go ahead and move approval.
Mayor, I'll second that, and I'll just add one comment, which is I think that, you know, we need to continue to find as much grant money and funding as we can to help with this campaign of educating our youth not to use cannabis and the detrimental effects of the use of cannabis by youth. Obviously, when the voters in the state of California and even in Encinitas decided to allow for cannabis use, it was for adult cannabis use and not use of cannabis by kids, minors. And so we need to do everything we can do to make sure that our youth are not using cannabis and they know the detrimental effects. This kind of reminds me of the tobacco campaign, you know, several decades ago. And so we are at ground zero and making sure families and kids are aware of the detrimental impacts of cannabis. And so we need to continue to seek funding like this to ensure that we're educating in our high schools, in all kinds of areas like the Boys and Girls Club, where there's a potential to reach out to young kids and let them know about the detrimental impact. So I'm happy to second this motion.
Okay, thank you. And Deputy Mayor Krantz? Oh, we can't hear you.
I agree that we should be researching, you know, trying to obtain grant funding. I think that I regret not having partners opposing the measure that was recently on the ballot to allow for distribution and cultivation of marijuana here in our city. But I will certainly be supporting this this particular item.
Are you ready to vote?
Yes, we are. Thank you.
Councilmember Hensy? Councilmember Hensy?
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Councilmember Lyons?
Yes.
Councilmember Mosca? You said yes. Deputy Mayor Krantz?
Yes.
And Mayor Blakespear?
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously. That concludes the consent calendar. We now move to item 10A.
Okay, thank you. This is Acadia Streetscape North Segment Options. Acting City Engineer Bankston, I think we'll take it.
Good afternoon, Mayor. On behalf of Development Services, I will be presenting this evening with Acting City Engineer Jill Bankston, also on standby. She is here with me this evening. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can. We can see the whole thing.
Okay. Okay. Today's action is for the City Council to, tonight's action, we will be going over the description of the iBank loan and potential loan amount, revisiting the goals and the vision of the Acadia Streetscape project, reviewing alternatives for the next segment of the Acadia Streetscape project. And
Lillian, can you turn the presentation into just the slide as opposed to the notes and everything else?
I apologize. Okay, let me try that one more time. Actually, Karen, can you cue the PowerPoint for me? Thank you very much. Okay, thank you.
Great, thanks.
Wonderful. The reason for this evening's meeting is at the May 3rd special City Council meeting, Council discussed the city budget and also an option of pursuing an iBank loan as a funding source for the next segment of the Acadia Streetscape project. For context, Finance Director Teresa McBroom is here with me this evening, and she will go over the terms of the proposed loan. Next slide, please, Karen.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and council members. This will be a brief presentation as this is a repeat from the strategic session, just as a reminder. Although the city has the borrowing capacity of $30 million, the city manager is recommending borrowing no more than $20 million. And the iBank is offering a projected rate of 3% annually on the loan. And then staff is recommending that we pay the debt over 15 years. Also, borrowing the $20 million will maintain the city's AAA credit rating, which is the highest rating available. Next slide, please. And then this is the schedule of future debt. We currently pay $3.5 million for 5 bonds that are outstanding. The blue bar represents the new debt, which is an annual payment of $1.7 million. So that would be a total of $5.2 million annually until 2031, and then it would be paid off in 2035. So this was just a reminder of why we chose the $20 million. That concludes my portion of the presentation, and I'll turn the presentation back to Director Doherty.
Thank you so much, Teresa. Next slide, please, Karen. In shaping the next iteration of this project, we sought to remain true to the original goals of the Acadia Streetscape project as envisioned. We wanted to keep these vision and project goals in mind as we look to build a project that would have the most impact and value to the community and deliver the project in the most cost-effective way. Next slide, please, Karen. Next slide. The vision of the Acadia Streetscape project was to create an environment that encouraged community engagement, offered space for community gathering, sidewalk dining, the display of retail goods, outside public seating, and showcasing of public art. This included improved mobility and additional parking opportunities. Next slide, please, Karen. Because our Highway 101 corridor is one of the most heavily traveled bicycle routes in the United States, the project has an objective of creating wide, well-marked bike lanes in order to support bicycle riding for all ability levels. Next slide, please, Karen. With reduced design speed of 25 to 30 miles per hour, the installation of roundabouts and narrowing traffic drive lanes will provide much needed traffic calming features to improve safety and mobility throughout this corridor. Next slide, please, Karen. An emphasis on art is also one of the central themes of the North Coast Highway 101, or of the Acadia Streetscape project. Acadia has always been known for the richness of its local community of artists. We believe that our streets should support and encourage our local artistic community. Next slide, please, Karen. And this brings us to the project alternatives, because with these goals in mind, we developed 2 alternatives for your consideration this evening. The next slide, please, Karen. This is alternative 1. Now I understand that sometimes these drawings can be confusing. So to help orient you, I just like to point out that the gray shaded section is the section of Streetscape that is currently under construction. The area that I would like to focus on this evening is the purple segment, which we call alternative 1, construction of segment B2 and C. This segment, as marked by the 2 circles at Jupiter Street and Bishopsgate, offers 2 roundabouts, as well as a focus on the west side and southbound 101 roadway improvements. The improvements would include curb and gutter, grinding and overlay of the southbound lane, buffered bike lanes, a parking assist lane, sidewalks and furniture, lighting, minor drainage, and irrigation and planting of trees. Next slide, please, Karen. This is in contrast to our alternative 2, which is construction of segment C. It is a shorter segment denoted here from Jupiter to Moorgate Road, and it includes 3 roundabouts being the primary difference in terms of in alternative 1, you receive linear footage versus alternative 2, where we would be receiving 3 roundabouts. Again, with a focus on the southbound 101 roadway improvements on the west side of the street, which would include the improvements of the type that I described on the previous slide. Next slide, please, Karen. Both of these alternatives would be considered base projects to which we would add additive alternatives that would include taking into account those goals and visions that I described previously, a DG trail, that's decomposed granite trail from A Street to Jupiter or Phoebe, depending on the alternative that was chosen this evening. It would include an additive alternative for a turn pocket extension for southbound traffic at Acadia Boulevard, an enhanced median and west side landscaping and irrigation, decorative crosswalks. That's 17 crosswalks of the type that, one example would be the type that we've seen by the lumber yard in downtown Encinitas, as well as art nodes, which would include lighting and electricity and space that could be used for either temporary or permanent art along sidewalks. The rescope segments of the project would include the items in detail that are described in the left side column. It's important for me that we highlight, instead of going through all of those items, those things that we would not be seeing, primarily those things on the east side lighting, east side landscaping, significant drainage improvements. While we will see minor drainage improvements, we would not see significant drainage improvements, as well as we wouldn't have the full grinding and overlay in the northbound traffic lane. However, one of the things I did want to highlight is that in a previous council meeting, we did approve a slurry project that would allow us to stripe a bike lane on the northbound lane. So it would provide that opportunity there. It just would not be of the same quality that we would see in the full grinding and milling that would occur on the west side. Next slide, please, Karen. So with both alternatives that we've described this evening, we expect that to bring these projects to advertisement, it would take approximately 9 to 12 months. And this is because there are several steps that would need to be considered. We would need to prepare the bid package. We would need to prepare an amendment through Coastal Commission, could be a material or immaterial amendment, a substantial conformance review, and a CEQA evaluation, as well as discussing with NCTD and SANDAG our new design. The bid package and design. Next slide, please. As well, we would like to just also mention that in order to bring such a significant project to fruition, it would also require a temporary position for senior engineer, communications funding, and construction management and inspection services. All of these things were included in our estimate of the project up to a $20 million project. Next slide, please. This evening, we will be seeking council direction on whether to pursue the iBank loan and the loan amount and which segments to pursue with the next construction contract for the Streetscape, the Acadia Streetscape project. Next slide, please. With that, this concludes my presentation. Acting City Engineer Jill Bankston and I stand by for any questions that the City Council may have.
Okay, thank you. I think we have several public speakers too, so I think we should ask questions. Well, how many public speakers do we have on this item, City Clerk?
We have 3.
3, okay. Is it okay with those of you with your hands up to hear the 3 speakers and then ask questions? Okay, great. Let's go ahead and do that.
Okay, our first speaker is Judy Burlfine. Judy, you can start ahead when ready, and you have 3 minutes.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. I think the projects look super. I like the 3 roundabouts. I feel a little bit bad talking now because I'm not sure I have all the pieces together, but I just want to make sure we focus as much as possible on ensuring that there are continuous bike lanes in both directions so we fulfill our goal of safety, safety, safety. And if we have to put off some of the landscaping till later and maybe we have community involvement in tree planting, I would be willing to give up trees for as much safety for cars, cyclists, and pedestrians as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. Our next speaker is Annika Walden.
Good evening, Council. I want to apologize. I was completely caught off guard earlier when I was called upon. I was supposed to speak on this item, so I apologize for my fumbling approach earlier tonight. Good evening. I am speaking on behalf of the Acadia 101 Main Street Association in support of staff's recommendation for agenda item 10A, alternative 2, Jupiter Street to Moorgate Road. We believe this alternative is a more encompassing and accounts for the growing diversified use of Highway 101. After staff's presentation tonight, we hope that we have another chance to speak on this or meet with staff, since the report was a little bit limited and lacks some information for a group to make a more comprehensive recommendation. We also hope that the council will continue to recommend staff to pursue more grant opportunities regarding the landscaping, tree canopy restoration, and beautification efforts that the original plan had called for. The importance of encouraging community engagement, offering space for community gathering, sidewalk dining, display of retail goods, outdoor public seating, and the showcasing of public art should not be completely lost with this slimmed down streetscape alternative. We thank you so much for your time and commitment to this project and the commitment to our beloved Acadia community. Thank you so much for your time tonight.
And then our next speaker is June Hansberger.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. My name is June Hansberger, and I'm a 30-year resident of Acadia. We have been waiting a long time in Acadia for Streetscape, and I'm asking that you fund this project using the iBank loan. I support alternative 2 for the Streetscape project because of the 3 roundabouts that are going to be placed, and they will help traffic, pedestrians, and bike flow and safety along 101. I'm a big proponent of roundabouts. They completely transformed Acadia Boulevard in our neighborhood, allowed our kids to actually ride their bikes across Acadia Boulevard, and made our neighborhood connect across Hymettus from north to south. It was transformative, and I am hoping that those roundabouts will do the same thing along Highway 101, because right now in Acadia, we are bifurcated when we go east to west. We cannot get from my neighborhood to the beach safely, and there's a lot of us trapped here. We have the rail corridor and we have Highway 101, and it is a dance of danger to get across both of those areas. So I am excited about the 3 roundabouts, but as excited as I am about this project, I was really disappointed to hear I think it's Doherty's description that once again, the east side of Highway 101 and my section of Acadia will not have safe bike lanes, sidewalks, and it sounds like that whole section is going to be ignored. So if I'm incorrect, I really hope that Ms. Doherty can explain that, but it sounded like what she said at the very end was that the east, or pardon me, I should say the side of 101 next to the train tracks was not going to have any improvements. So I would appreciate some clarification on that, because if that's the case, I am going to be very disappointed that we are not once again going to see any improvements. However, thank you for keeping Streetscape front and center. I really appreciate it, and I look forward to seeing more descriptions on this project. Have a great evening. Thank you very much for your time.
And then I'm just double checking. We did have Robert Slater, but I do not see him on. So that does conclude public comments on this item.
Okay, thank you. Thank you to the public comments. I think the public largely wants us to proceed forward and is happy to maybe not come and participate again and say we want Streetscape again and again. So thank you to the 3 of you who did come tonight. I'll go in the order that I think you've put your hands up. So Councilmember Hinsey.
Thank you. So I have a couple of questions, and I'll just ask them all at once and give staff the chance to respond to all of them at once. And I'm curious to know, I think we have a lot of support for the 3 roundabout version, which is alternative 2. I really support this too, because I think what our challenge is with roundabouts is that we want so many of them that we can hardly construct all of them with the money that we have. So it's important, I think, to get these included as part of our the money that we're going to be borrowing. And I'm curious to know from staff's perspective if one of these two alternatives would provide us more ease in getting through these entitlement steps that you laid out, particularly with the Coastal Commission. So if 3 roundabouts makes our project more consistent with the EIR and with the entitlements we've already pursued, then I think
Oh no.
I'm back.
Oh, there you are.
I don't know what happened. I've already made sure that everybody in the family is off the Wi-Fi. So I want to make sure, one, that we're choosing the alternative that provides us the easiest path to get Coastal Commission consistency. The second question I have about these alternatives is, we like having this whole list of additive alternatives that we're really hoping will be part of this $20 million package. And is there one alternative that gets us further down that list with more of these options we're hoping for than the other? And I just want to confirm, to Judy's point, that we are going to have a southbound bike lane throughout the whole project. I know initially we had envisioned shaving some of the medians down to make room for the bike lane and the parking. And so I just want to make sure that even though we're not doing some of the middle improvements with this version, that we still have that dedicated bike lane. So those are my 3 questions.
Thank you. I will ask Jill to answer specifically the bike lane question. And then with respect to the entitlements, I do have Assistant Director Royce Powell on the line, but I do believe that in order for us to better understand the coordination with Coastal Commission, we would need to engage with them and better understand their concerns. I don't believe that there is an alternative that necessarily stands out one over the other.
So for the southbound project, as Lillian mentioned, we have a slurry project that's going to go through and add some modifications to the roadway out there in the sections where we won't have streetscape improvements at this time. But the Acadia Streetscape project, both of the segments that you're considering and both the alternatives you're considering will include a buffered bike lane for southbound traffic.
But wait, I don't think that really answered her question, because I think the question was specifically what Judy said, which is, will there be a continuous bike lane in both directions through the improved project and the unimproved project?
So there will be accommodations for bikes throughout the entire length, but we're not bringing the entire corridor down to 1 lane, and there's not enough width to have 2 lanes of traffic and a buffered bike lane the entire way through the corridor. So we will have to transition from buffered bike lane in the areas where we have 1 lane of traffic and we've constructed the streetscape improvements. And then particularly around Leucadia Boulevard, where we need 2 lanes of traffic in each direction, it will have to transition to a Sharrow because we just don't have the width to accommodate a buffered bike lane the entire way through.
Well, I'm disappointed to hear that. And I wonder if there's not something else that we can do, which would include eliminating some parking or reshuffling the parking so that we take some off street and find a place that we can do another temporary parking pod in some of the rail right of way, because that's really important. I think that we eliminate transitions between different classes of bike lanes.
That's something that we can take a look at. Of course, it's very difficult to remove parking spaces through Coastal Commission. They'll ask for a count, but we can absolutely take a look and see what opportunities there are and see if there are some ways to get the buffered bike lane all the way through the corridor. We'll work with our designer on that.
Thank you.
But to follow up on that, the current design of Streetscape is as you describe it. Is that correct, Jill? We're not modifying anything to, that was always going to be the case in terms of that 2-lane stretch between Phoebe and Europa was going to have that challenge of 2 lanes of cars, parking and bikes, right?
Yes, that's correct.
And if I may just add that I think that trying to attempt to change at this point from what was permitted could have some impacts in our discussions with Coastal Commission.
Okay, so just to clarify, I'm sorry for the rest of the people who are waiting here, but just so we don't leave this item and then have to come back to it. So what you're saying, I just want to clarify, is that Streetscape's plan has always been around Acadia Boulevard, like Councilmember Kranz just said, from Phoebe to Europa, there is no actual bike lane. Like we've always planned Streetscape to have it merge into a Sharrow. Is that really true?
I'll have to look at the history. That's the 70% plans from 2 years ago, which is approximately how long I've been here. That's what that plan set shows. But I think there have been some different iterations through the years. As you know, the project's been around a really long time. So I can look and see through the project history if there were other configurations that included the buffered bike lane all the way through.
Well, we don't need to do that. I mean, the point is like, what is the plan that has Coastal Commission approval? Like, we don't want to be like looking back to other stuff that we couldn't, you know, that just seems crazy. So, but I just, yeah, I guess this is like so the mobility aspect is a key part of this project. So it just shocks me that this whole time we've had a Sharrow as part of the final design. Because I thought the bike lane was like a key part and it was going to be continuous from end to end. But that what you're saying right now is that that's not the case.
Right. The difficulty is just the space challenge. We just don't have enough room to have 2 lanes, turn pockets, and buffered bike lanes in both directions at the Leucadia intersection.
Okay. Okay, Kelly, I'll turn it back to you to finish your questions and then I'll go to the rest.
Well, yeah, I am surprised to hear that because when I joined council, I think we had the 30% plans, and included in those 30% plans was an on-street dedicated bike lane. I don't recall if it had the buffer, a 2-foot buffer or not, but there was indeed a bike lane. So I hope that we can work to figure out a way what was depicted on that plans that is what we have moving forward. And so another question that's come from the community is this question of trees. And it sounds like we're able to achieve the trees on the west side and tree planting in the medians. But could staff discuss a little bit about when you say we're going to have to sacrifice some of the landscaping, does that mean that we're able to install the irrigation for a future phase when either we can get landscaping through future funding or through a community partnership?
So we have, our intent is to install, or the option that we provided to you is to install irrigation and trees on the west side of the roadway, and then not to touch the medians at this time. We have an additive alternate that would include some of the irrigation and the landscaping in the medians as if their funding allows. But to conserve costs and to stretch our dollars and be able to get the most improvements and the most safety improvements in the project, we did take a look at reducing the landscaping and irrigation costs, and that meant taking out the shrubs and the trees from the median in this phase. That's not to say that there wouldn't be a future phase that could add them back in.
Okay, thank you.
Was that all your questions, Councilmember Hensy?
For now, yeah.
Okay. Councilmember Lyons.
Thank you, Mayor Blakespear. I am asking some clarifying questions also. I understand, and I'm not quite sure I heard it today, and it might be helpful to pull up the graphic, but I understand that I understand that the new medians have been removed from the project. Is that the right way to say it? So there's the proposals today, both of them are showing or indicating that there will not be space for the medians and the medians will not be constructed. Correct? Is that saying the same thing? And the reason I'm asking, because I don't want there to be misconfusion or confusion, misunderstanding about that trees could be added later into the medians or something like that, because we're not even allowing space for the medians anymore. Is that correct?
No, the medians that are in place now would remain in place as is.
The existing, yeah.
Yep, you got it.
And the plan is that there are no new medians.
The plan is that we would not touch the existing medians. So the full-blown streetscape plan removed the old medians, adjusted some of the pavement grades to improve drainage, and then poured back new medians with new landscaping, conserving the big trees that were out there. But again, to stretch our dollars, we're leaving the existing medians in place and not touching them. We're just paving up to them on the west side.
Thank you. My next question is, I've gotten a lot of comment about the segment D being that it's the northernmost segment, and how important it is to provide the continuity across from the north end, throughout the whole north end up to La Costa and through the intersection. I think there's a lot of public sentiment behind that. I know we're not showing that on any of our alternatives, but I believe it's because we have a different source of funding for that segment. And I just want to ask if I'm understanding that is not our intent to deprioritize segment D, but that it's identified to be complete and is still a priority, but under separate funding.
That's correct. There's a private development project application that's in with the city that would develop that parcel, and they would be conditioned to construct the curb, gutter, and sidewalk and the frontage improvements in that section from Moorgate up to the La Costa intersection.
And if I just may, that has not gone to Planning Commission at this time. So that is our intent to continue to work with that developer and that application. But it is not guaranteed at this time.
I know it's not what we're talking about specifically today, but I just want to make a note that it's going to be really important to coordinate for transition reasons with what then remains, what then we do with that remaining piece, given the changes we're proposing for Streetscape.
Certainly, and that would factor into our final cost. Is if that private development is not approved or does not go through, then we would have to add those costs into our Streetscape project when we seek funding.
I'm sorry, but I do have a couple more questions. I wonder if the plan views could be brought back up, because it's a little bit hard at this scale to totally grasp what's in and what's out based on alternative 1 and alternative 2. I believe alternative 1 does cover more area, more geographic area, and alternative 2 has 3 roundabouts, and I get that. But if we go with alternative 2 with the 3 roundabouts, it's a smaller area. So what are we losing if we go with alternative 2? What is that gap, or what is that area that is not included? I think it's identified.
Yeah.
Back one slide, Karen.
Yeah, so we're calling it B2. It's a portion of segment B, and it's the section from Phoebe to Jupiter. So the approximate cost of the Grandview roundabout, if we didn't construct it, we'd be able to do additional frontage improvements between Jupiter and Phoebe. That's the chief difference.
And so what would those additional frontage elements be that we would be saying, no, we want the roundabout instead of these? What are those things when you say additional frontage?
It's the same standard streetscape improvements that you're seeing from Jupiter to Moorgate. We would just be able to expand them down to Phoebe. So it's the wider sidewalks and the parking and the buffered bike lane. Those streetscape improvements we could extend down to Phoebe for the approximate same cost as constructing a roundabout at Grandview.
And so if we don't include that section like is proposed in alternative 2, what happens? Let's just use the buffered bike lane. We're going to have buffered bike lane in the segment where we're going to move forward with, but it sounds like then we would have a section that is not up to the same standard?
So we would transition back to 4 lanes heading south from whatever the endpoint of this project is. And yes, we would transition from having the space to have the buffered bike lane, in some cases, the reverse angle parking drive aisle, and we'd transition back to just a Sharrow likely. I can take a look at the plans and I can get back to you and anybody who's interested with what the cross section will look like in that section.
Oh, that'd be very informative. I always kind of feel the devil's in the detail here. We might think big picture, but then when it starts getting built, we go, why didn't we see that? Why didn't we think of that? And continuity really plays in very strongly with safety, I think. And I think as Councilmember Hinsey also pointed out, that continuity is very important. It's what we expect, especially when it comes to that buffered bike lane. And so we just, as we consider these options, we just want to pay attention to what it means that's not going to get built, and be sure we're comfortable with that. That section right there is a concern, but any section that's not getting built that would disrupt continuity is a concern for me. Thank you. I think I have one more, but. Oh, and then my only other question was, as far as the add alternates on slide 13, if you could go to the next slide. Would you consider that these are in a order of priority, that the first one would be the highest priority if we can afford it, and then we'd go down the list as far as priority, as far as what we could afford, or is it not quite organized that way yet?
We haven't organized it yet that way.
Okay.
Although I would just add that I do believe that the DG Trail has some priority because it does offer the pedestrian mobility throughout the corridor and that connectivity. So I do just want to emphasize that would be significant for us, and something that we would recommend be prioritized, as well as potentially the turn pocket to reduce the amount of queuing at Acadia Boulevard. So I do just want to mention those 2 items we would consider would be priorities.
I'll stand down now. Thank you.
Thank you. Those are good questions. Deputy Mayor.
Okay. Yeah, and I am in support, like the commenters tonight, of building the 3 roundabouts. I remember advocating for 3 roundabouts on Acadia Boulevard, and here we are 15 years later, and there still are only 2. So I would definitely want to make sure we built the roundabouts that were part of this, because I think their value for pedestrians and traffic calming is significant, and we don't want to miss out on that opportunity in this significant project that we are considering. As was pointed out in this slide presentation, the Streetscape is the biggest project the city has ever undertaken, and we're making some tremendous strides. And I just want to be sure that if we're going to do some debt financing of this project, that we have those very important traffic calming measures. The other thing that I would like to ask of staff is that they consider, they put in an additive alternative that would include the improvements to bus stops on the Highway 101, and that they work with NCTD staff to make sure that the NCTD has completed their analysis of where these bus stops might best be located. But I do know that one of the busiest bus stops that we have, especially on the northbound side, is at Acadia Boulevard. And that stop is unfortunately impacted significantly by storm events. So if there were any way to get some hardscape or pavers or something that was even, just because we may not be doing the full improvements that will come in the future, that we could at least get that bus turnout area improved to the point where it wasn't a disaster for folks riding buses. And, you know, the other bus stops that have their own Instagram page and, you know, a picture of the new chairs that show up, it would be outstanding to be able to have an additive alternative that looked at how we could make improvements to all the bus stops, and especially on the east side of the 101 corridor.
Is that all your comments?
Yes, for now.
Councilmember Mosca.
Perhaps we can lobby NCTD for some of those bus stops as well. That would be an additional funding source for some of those.
Why don't I just say that I have worked with NCTD quite a bit. They base all of the infrastructure improvements to bus stops are based upon the ridership, and that Encinitas ridership doesn't meet the threshold. So essentially it boils down to, if we want to improve bus stops in our city because of the our auto-centric community doesn't meet the threshold. So we get to pay for our bus improvements.
I always dislike, and I'm sure you do too, dislike that analysis. Like, you know, sitting on transit boards, I always push back and say, you know, well, ridership would be higher if we made it better, more convenient, and easier for people to take a bus or take a train. And so, yeah, I hear you. The ridership's low, but I wish people would look at what it could be if we actually made these changes, because I agree with you that it's always interesting to see the lack of bus stops and the shelter for folks that would like to take buses. Anyway, back to this project. A lot has already been said, so a lot of my comments and questions have been asked and stated. But I did want to focus on a couple of things. One is that we're talking about a year or so into the future. Optimistically, we get approval from the California Coastal Commission, and then we start to kind of queue this up. We're at least a year into the future, perhaps even further. And now, just kind of like being fresh off of our planning session where we talk about, still kind of a little bit raw on some projects. We talk about the fact that there's a bit of gap between, on city staff and what the market will give or what the value is at any one point in time. And then also there are escalators that are happening, cost of labor and other things that are going up. And so just want to ask the question because it's just top of mind for me. We say that these additives and stuff come to $20 million. So let's fast forward a year and a half. Have we considered, an escalator? So this is what we're saying we can do for 20 million. Is that assuming this project's not going to be ready to move forward for a year or so? And then also, what have we done to kind of check in with the market to kind of understand that this is in fact, 20 million? Because, as there are more projects happening and there's, the pressure on the labor market and other things, how do we know that it's 20 million even right now? And so I just kind of want to ask that question.
So thank you, Councilmember Mosca. I would say that because of the escalation that we've seen in construction prices, we elected for a base project that we believe we can afford. And that is why our strategy proposes a base project that we are confident that we can award in 1 year's time, as well as additive alternatives that would then, should we be able to afford them, then we can add again at that time. This also builds into an opportunity if we get grant funding to be flexible and responsive. Should we get grant funding to add to the project as well. With respect to, I apologize, you asked another question about, with respect to our estimates, we do have the Streetscape project that is in construction and the El Portal project, and we have updated our estimates based on those quite recent construction contract awards, as well as other contracts that we've been awarding throughout the course of the year. So while I can't say that an estimate is an estimate, we do believe we have utilize the best available information to develop a project that we believe we can move forward with in 1 year's time.
So let me just kind of unpack that. So we've extrapolated from projects that are happening in our city right now, to kind of come to the cost that we're assigning right now, and the 20 million is assuming that the project's not going to start a year and a half or so from now. It's not today's present value, but you've built into that 20 million is not, if we were shovel ready right now, it would cost us less than $20 million. Is that what you're saying? And then in a year from now, so you've built in that escalator in this project.
So our approach was to develop a base project, either alternative one or alternative two, that was in a $14.5 to $15.5 million estimate. All additive alternatives would be added to that, depending on what we could afford. And we believe that a $14.5 to $15.5 estimate sufficiently builds in an escalator for 1 year. With respect to these additive alternatives, in some cases, we don't have recent data. For example, art nodes, that is not something that we have built recently. Decorative crosswalks, we do have one estimate, but not several estimates. So the additive alternatives don't have the same kind of backup data we have on the base project.
All right, perfect. Well, that's a bit more responsive. I do think that several of us sit on other boards, and we're starting to see these kind of, especially in water projects and wastewater, these design builds where we kind of bring in the contractor on some of these projects early on, and they help us design the project within a certain budget. I think I'm just wondering out loud that you don't need to respond to this, but if we can do something like that so that we're having more of an understanding as we're designing it, what the market is going to charge us for whatever we're going to do. One last question. You talked about grants, and when we were looking at this years ago, a couple years back, we talked about that either within the loan documents or bond documents, if it was going to go the bond route, which is not because we're looking at iBank, that we would basically list several of our major CIP projects just in case, as you said, that we were successful with grant money, that we could basically shift those funds to some other project like, Santa Fe or whatever. But I've recently found out that we can't do that, that when we basically go for this, we fill out this loan application, we're not going to be putting down multiple projects. It's this project or no other project, the funds don't get used. And so just want to explore with you for a moment timing. The President of the United States has talked about $1 trillion infrastructure package that they're likely to kind of move out on through the reconciliation process, which they did one already, and that allows them to do another one coming up. And then the governor has been talking about $100 billion surplus that the state has, and he's wanting to infuse that into transportation, tons of transportation stuff. So talk to me about timing here. I would love to not have to talk about debt. I would love to talk about grant money. I think that certainly as we're moving forward with the process to kind of get whatever administrative, whatever regulatory approvals we need, we need to do that to queue this up. But in terms of loans, if we had the approval today to move forward, what is the timing here? Because I really want to make sure we're taking advantage of what's going on right now in the country, in the state, in terms of funding. And I want to make sure that we're not kind of moving too quickly into this lane. So I just kind of want to hear more about the staff's thinking in terms of timing.
So if I may, Councilmember Mosca, you're absolutely right. There's a number of funding opportunities that are out there, and Our team, as well as the city manager and her team, are working closely to identify those opportunities and to leverage them where we are the right fit. We have identified a raise grant that we would love to be able to submit a package for. We understand that our project has several of the characteristics that would be competitive. The state is also considering supplementing the ATP program this year, and our Streetscape project was also listed there. However, the challenge for us is none of these things are certain. And so while we can pre-position ourselves to be competitive, you know, especially with the infrastructure bill, it's unclear what the timing of that is going to be. We have submitted a $4 million segment to Congressman Levin's office. So we are exploring all options, seeking to be as flexible as we can be. But it is very difficult with respect to timing because we're not clear. I know that with respect to the raise grant, for example, the timing is that we have to submit an application by July. And so there are, and I apologize that I'm not particularly responsive to your question. It's just, I think for us, timing and certainty are not things that are known at this time.
Madam Mayor, if I could I just inquire from the city manager? I know that you sit with other city managers and you've done a lot throughout the state of California. Could you take a stab at this question in terms of just timing and share with us some of your thoughts? Is there more clarity coming up? In the latter part of the year? I mean, just wanted to kind of get your thoughts on this because this is a big move for us, and I want to make sure that there's no rock left unturned before we completely go down this path.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor and Councilmember Mosca. So there are a lot of moving pieces right now with regard to all of the different potential federal funding opportunities. What I would suggest that you do tonight is focus on one of the options so that we can start to narrow down what the cost would be and we could start preparing bid documents, et cetera. When you make that decision tonight, it doesn't mean that we have to run out tomorrow and fill out the loan application and have it ready to go. Unlike a home equity line of credit or something like that, it will take a few months for us to get through the iBank process. And we can start that process at any time. So for example, laying it out, if City Engineer Bankston gets her bid documents together and puts them out, and then we get those back, we can wait until we see the full cost of those before we actually put in paperwork for the iBank loan. And another thing, and I think was something that I mentioned to a few of you this week, about a year ago when we started this process of potential loans from the iBank, there was a thought that we could put in for an amount, and if we received funding through some other source, that we could then use that funding for something else. What we've learned through this process since that time is that the iBank does require us to identify what the project is. So I can see that there could be some concern that if you borrowed the money and then you received money for something else, what would you do then? I think that there's some room here for us, especially over the next few months, over the summer. We wouldn't be running out and applying for this loan tomorrow anyway. We would be waiting and looking to see what kinds of things that we might get funding for. And just to kind of list the ones that we're waiting for, the first one is we do have a $4 million segment that we have proposed to Senator Levin's office, and we should hear about that one sometime in July. We are just now receiving some of the information on the American Recovery Act. We've made a determination that it doesn't look like we'll be able to use that money for Streetscape, possibly for some of the stormwater pieces of it, but not really to the extent that we would need. So we've really thought about using that for something else and bringing that forward to you. And then there's the larger infrastructure bills that are being debated right now, as you had mentioned in Congress. The idea behind those are big infrastructure projects. We're hearing transportation, we're hearing mobility. So there could potentially be something there from those funds. But I think you still have time before you have to actually apply for the loan. But it is important for us to at least try to get to the potential loan amount and then what you would want to do, what segments you would want to do for those dollars.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing those thoughts. That really makes me much more comfortable that, some of the thoughts, thinking that's going on behind the scenes for some of this. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. So before I go to round two, I'm going to make a couple comments and questions. So if we could put the map back up, that alternative 2 map. I wanted to ask, so one of the, June, who called in, one of the public comments asked about the east side improvements. And I think, first of all, I just want to clarify that this is all west of the railroad tracks. So this entire project is not taking place on Vulcan or in the neighborhoods at all. So this is all west of the railroad tracks. But my understanding, and I just want to confirm this from staff, is that what you're saying when you're talking about these west side improvements is that's where the businesses are, and that's closer to the ocean, obviously. And so the project will be basically exclusively that side of Highway 101. It won't be the side that's in the rail corridor. And right now, the section of Streetscape that we're currently doing, this segment A, is that what we're currently doing? Segment A, yeah. That A Street to Basel, or no, we're currently doing the part that's gray. So it's Marchetta to Basel. But that segment, we are doing the portion in the rail corridor, and we are doing the west side. So I just want to clarify that that's true, that phase, the very first phase of Streetscape we're doing includes the section in the rail corridor and the west side, and that this next one we're talking about for 20 million, regardless of these two options, it's only the west side of Highway 101 that really gets touched.
Thank you.
That's accurate, right? Yeah. Okay,
that is correct. And I do just also want to just articulate that on the east side, there is a coastal rail trail, there is double tracking, there's a number of permanent improvements that do need to go in, and that this project was anticipated to be temporary on the east side of the 101 until those permanent infrastructure improvements go in. When considering the type of project and how to best use limited city funds, we elected to go with those improvements that would be, we would see the benefit for in the long run.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think that's wise, but I just also, because of I just want to repeat, because what you just said sort of used the word east a couple different ways. So east of the railroad tracks, which is over on the Vulcan side, is where I think the thinking is that we will at some point have a coastal rail trail. But basically that's a Sandag project, and there's not consensus between the city and Sandag, and there's just basically, essentially that's like still under study. So that's in the middle term, longer term, but in the shorter term, there's no plan for a coastal rail trail to be built on the west side of the railroad tracks, but on the east side of Highway 101, right? I mean, that's not, I just want to make sure that you didn't think you were saying that, because I'm pretty sure that that's not the case. We can't hear you.
I apologize if I was unclear, Madam Mayor. So I'm not sure whether Sandag has determined the final alignment for the coastal rail trail. I think on our end, we didn't want to be presumptive, and we wanted to preserve the real estate that would be necessary for double tracking and coastal rail trail, rather than seek to improve an area that could be affected once those improvements go in.
Right. Okay. And so on this, the segments that we're talking about tonight, alternative 1 and 2, in the previous plan for Streetscape, did they include parking pods and improvements in the rail corridor?
So in the interim plan that was approved with Coastal Commission in 2019, there were parking pods, and there was also a median on the street on the east side of the 101 to separate the bike lane as a buffered bike lane. Those items are not being constructed. But I do just want to reiterate that with respect to slurry and striping to create a bike lane on the northbound side, in the northbound lane, that will occur, but just not as part of this Streetscape project.
Okay, so when one of the things about Coastal Commission approval, in order for it not to be a whole new project, right, that it has to be consistent with the project that we've already have approved, and that has to do with the amount of parking we're providing and the mobility improvements and things. I mean, so when we're going back to Coastal Commission with a 9 to 12 month timeline, are we presenting this as we are planning to build these parking pods in the future, and this is the first 20 million? I'm asking that, I mean, for obvious reasons. Like, I don't want the exclusion of the parking pod to result in the rejection of the project.
So so in the same way that when we went with phase, the segment of Streetscape that is under construction, we indicated that this was a project that is in an interim phase, and the final project could not be completed until NCTD and SANDAG move forward with their projects. We explained that we were going to construct the project. We scaled down the project under an interim plan approval. The phase that is under construction was a segment of that interim plan approval. And similarly, what we would go back with is another segment of what was approved under the interim plan.
Okay, good. So that seems to me like it would be most likely to be successful. So that's really good to hear. Okay, and then to the question of transitions and bike lanes, transitions on both the north and the south side, and it's not just bike lanes, but also sidewalks. And my feeling is that the city does a really good job with our projects, our public works projects, and thinking ahead about transitions, and that you are going to make this as seamless as possible, and that it's not going to just like abruptly end, like in the way one city merging with another city frequently just ends. Like the city stopped striping, the bike lane ended, and like all of a sudden it's like the Wild West for whatever the person was doing. And this is all within our city, and obviously I'm hopeful, and I just want you to confirm that you will create a transition that makes this as smooth as possible on both the north and south ends of segment C, regardless of which alternative we choose.
Yeah, yes, Madam Mayor, I can confirm that. So with this segment of Streetscape that is under construction, we built in those transitions to ensure that it did not appear disruptive. It didn't have that, it just ends. That's one of the reasons why it does take us a little bit longer to prepare bid package documents, because we do need to build in those transitions. And I invite Acting City Engineer Jill Langston to add additional detail, but the team is very much aware that in order to provide mobility and safety, all of those transitions, as well as aesthetics, need to be considered as part of the package that goes out to bid.
Okay, and then between the two options of 1 and 2, I do agree with my colleagues that building the 3 roundabouts at the same time ensures that they get built, and that it's quite likely that that third roundabout, 15 years later could end up not being built, and I think that would be a problem. So, but I did want to understand better that if we did make Streetscape go farther, like basically from Jupiter to Phoebe is those extra 2 blocks right there, and we didn't do the third roundabout, what would happen at that section where the third roundabout was not built? Would it just be nothing? Like, would it just be a straight road? or would there be a light or a stop sign or a speed bump, or what would happen?
So it would just, yes, it would just be similar to how it is today. There aren't any intersection controls on the 101 currently at Grandview, and it would continue to be that way. So you might get some speeding up of traffic in between the two roundabouts could occur if you didn't have that middle roundabout to keep people slow.
Okay, so I guess I would want to just confirm with my colleagues that, Streetscape proceeding further toward Leucadia Boulevard, recognizing that then it goes back to 2 lanes and, it becomes unimproved. If we could get it to go a little bit farther to the south, those extra 2 blocks, that would be really great. And just that third roundabout, like on Acadia Boulevard, obviously there's a stop sign. So there's like 2 roundabouts and a stop sign, which really doesn't work. But if it's just going to be open, I just want my colleagues who drive in Acadia perpetually and my other 2 colleagues, who maybe do too, to just confirm that you really feel like that third roundabout is really worth not going another 2 blocks to the south, because it does seem like that's, really like a pretty critical thing. So we're basically saying we're going to use this money to keep speeding down a little bit. If that's like really the main risk of not building the third roundabout is not congestion, it's speed. So, let me just make the rest of my comments and then I'll call on you who both have your hand up. So I want to emphasize that I think the priorities as you laid out are the right ones. So the DG trail as the first additive alternative would be really great to get that. That just would adds a lot of mobility to this project. And then the turn pocket being second. I think I just want to re-emphasize that the mobility improvements, the way people actually move around our city is the key part of this project. Like it's a mobility project. And so, and it's an aesthetic project and it's a safety project. But if we can, if there are opportunities for us to improve that mobility, like with a continuous bike lane that doesn't merge into a sharrow, like as long as possible, and involves a DG trail, all those things are the most important thing to me as a policymaker, and the thing that's been really driving this project kind of for me, like year after year after year, and this kind of investment in the money that we're putting into it as a city is because of these mobility improvements, like as their core. So I just want to really re-emphasize that. And obviously everything else is also important too, but it's just getting those key things is really important. And then the last comment I'll make is just the biggest picture comment, which is that I'm really so excited that we are doing this second phase of Streetscape. I'm grateful to the staff for putting together a plan that we can accomplish a substantial part of Streetscape that's north of Leucadia Boulevard and south of La Costa, like this core part, 2 or 3 roundabouts, is really exciting. We've been talking about Streetscape for years and years and years, and this will substantially complete Streetscape. And I'm excited about the fact that we're able to figure it out. So thank you for doing that. And I hope that we can really keep it to 9 to 12 months. That's really a disappointment, that length of time. I was hopeful that we would just be able to just start the construction like in phasing, kind of like we've done before with other projects where we just phase them instead of having to go back for all these additional approvals, because that just creates, a lot of delay. But I trust that you've already looked into that and that's not possible. I guess I'll just ask Lillian if that's the case, that it's just not possible for us to not go back through every layer of government here.
Unfortunately, that is something that we've looked into, and those are the required coordinations that we need to move forward with at this time. However, my team has great relationships with all of these organizations, and we can certainly initiate discussions and tee up the discussions to try to save as much time as possible.
Okay, and then before I call on Councilmember Lyons, I think I'll just ask Councilmember Hinsey that question about that third roundabout being critical at Grandview. Do you want to just quickly answer that part?
Yeah, I will advocate for that third roundabout for a couple of reasons. And one is that Grandview Street, being that that's the beach access point, has so much volume of cars that are coming in and out of the community. Making a left onto Highway 101 across those what will be 2 lanes of traffic, it's currently 3 lanes of traffic, often backs up Grandview Street for 10 or 15 cars while people wait to make this turn. And so I think it'll really help with the circulation there. Also, it's my understanding, and maybe staff can correct me if this is a misunderstanding, but thinking forward to our future rail crossings, Grandview's high on that list. And I'm pretty sure that when you have a rail crossing, you also need to manage the intersection either with a signal or a roundabout, which is why we went forward with the roundabout at El Portal, because the signal creates backup in both directions and doesn't allow for the crossing of people so easily. And so I think it's important to have that roundabout in the case that we are able to get a railroad crossing at Grandview Street, that we have already managed that intersection. I think, for the downtown Encinitas streetscape, they completed the project, they closed out the project, but every year after that, there was an effort to complete missing sidewalks. And I think that's a lot easier to accomplish because you can do that with smaller amounts of money. And so that there are certain improvements like I think it's called the sales building. Tony will correct me if I'm wrong, but where the French Corner Bakery is, they've already largely improved that sidewalk. And there are a lot of temporary sidewalks that were put in place a long time ago that provide the crossing at least, or provide the crosswalks. So
Okay.
I think the Grandview roundabout's critical.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and I'll just add, I don't want to cut anybody off, but I just keep hearing this part about the bike lanes through Acadia Boulevard. And I've pulled up two different renderings. One was our 30% plans of streetscape from, I think it was 2019 now, and they do include a skinny, and it's an unbuffered, but it's still a class 2 bike lane at the, both in the southbound and northbound sides of Acadia Boulevard intersection. And then at a certain point in time, this council considered doing an interim bike lane all the way southbound. And so those plans also include a striping plan that has a 5-foot bike lane through the intersection as well. So I hope we can use those renderings as materials that it's possible to do it. And it might take skinning some of the northbound side and putting parking in places like near the Lucadia Roadside Park where we currently don't have parking and there's some underutilized lanes. But I think there's a way that we can keep all the parking that was conditioned with the project and provide the on-street dedicated bike lanes at that intersection.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Lyons.
Thank you, Mayor Blakespear. I appreciate everyone's comments because it's kind of been helpful to me as well. I'm going to use this graphic we still have up here to ask either Jill or Lillian a question. I understand that this is the preferred. I'm hearing, like I said, I'm hearing from the public, I'm hearing from my colleagues here on council that the 3 roundabouts are important. But I wonder if someone can walk me through what the bicycle experience would be for someone riding south on the west side of the street. I understand the purple area. If you could kind of help me move through this. I understand the purple area is a buffered bike lane. And then I understand we're transitioning. And would it be possible, can you walk me through, we're transitioning at Jupiter, and what are we transitioning to? And then where do we transition again, and what do we transition to there? Do you have enough information to help with that? Help me visualize that.
So we've asked, this question has come up before, and we've asked our designer to put together an exhibit for us that will kind of show how the bikes and the peds will get through if we're going to move forward with just certain segments of streetscape at this time. So I don't have anything very detailed, but it would be buffered bike lane to Jupiter, and then there would be a transition to a Shero. So the bike lane will narrow, there will be warning signs to alert drivers to watch out and make space for cyclists. And it's something similar that we're doing with our current phase 1, which is Marchetta to Basel. So although our actual roadway improvements are Marchetta to Basel, there are transitions up to about Daphne on the north end and not quite to A Street on the south end, but several hundred feet of transitioning people back to what's existing currently out there.
And that's being done on this segment A because we're just transitioning back to existing. It was initially going to continue all the way through. Okay. And then, so we have existing all the way where the green dash line is, all the way up to Jupiter.
Sorry, we have existing, what was the question?
So we're keeping the existing scenario where the bicyclist will share the lane via the Sharrow with the vehicles between Basil and Jupiter. And that's really what we're talking about this does.
Yes, although we are doing some striping improvements with a slurry and some new striping to create some more space for the cyclists in that area. But we're putting together a graphic to help explain that visually, what each user group, the pedestrians and the cyclists, will have access to in the various segments. So once we have that put together, we'll be able to share that.
I just want to reiterate, and then I'll be done, that I think the continuity of this mobility solution is important. And I think this plan unfortunately doesn't achieve what we're trying to do for continuity. Honestly, I don't see an option. If someone else does, that's great. We know our money is limited. I don't know. That's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Kranz, Deputy Mayor Kranz.
Yeah, I was just going to add to Councilmember Hensey's observations about a roundabout at Grandview Street that we have a situation on Neptune where there are a lot of cyclists who ride up Neptune, and then Grandview is their way back to Highway 101 because Neptune dead ends essentially at Grandview's staircase. So not only is it important for automobile movement, but for bicyclists and pedestrians, it's really pretty critical too. So in addition to my desire to see all 3 roundabouts built, Grandview as the missing roundabout isn't very attractive for those very important bike and pedestrian improvements that Grandview roundabout would represent. So, and I think that these questions about the continuity are important, and I think that this issue about what happens in terms of a bicyclist once they hit Phoebe Street is important to get answered. So my hope is that Director Doherty and her team can put something together that would address that particular issue, because I think it's important that we do our best to obtain that continuity. And so, I would like to move that we direct staff to focus on the Segment C approach, and that we include the additive alternative list that they have. And we, if it's not too much trouble, might ask that they also include the B2 segment, Phoebe to Jupiter, as an additive alternative as well. So that if it was possible to do the 3 roundabouts and that section, we would have that as an option. I know when we built the park, there were a number of additive alternatives that we asked bidders to provide us the cost to accomplish those parts. So with the addition of additive alternative B2, Phoebe to Jupiter, and bus stop improvements, that would be my motion, is to focus on Segment C.
Okay, I'll second that, but it's not Segment C, it's Alternative 2. Right?
Alternative 2, well, I just happen to be looking at Segment C, but so yes, Alternative 2, it's got the big circle around it and it says Segment C. I should have looked at yeah, sorry about that, but yes, Alternative 2.
Okay. Yeah, I just really, is there anyone on this call tonight who can really explain this bike lane problem? It's really a big deal. And I mean, it really makes me wonder, are all segments of our city communicating with each other? Are our attorneys, our risk managers, our engineering staff, are we, because for Kelly to say that she just pulled up the 30% drawing and it has a bike lane, and now you're telling us that, and I mean, they've been doing the subcommittee. I don't know if you've never brought this up, every other week you guys meet, and You've never brought up the fact that the bike lane disappears. Like, I'm really struggling about this and I really want more information. Is there anybody who can give some more information about this?
Jill, can you talk about the bike lane or where the segment is that there's not enough room or et cetera?
Yeah, the difficulty we have is just space. So for example, on the south side of the Acadia Boulevard intersection, if you have 2 lanes, which is our current configuration, you have 2 northbound turn lanes or through lanes, a right turn lane over the tracks, a left turn lane onto Acadia Boulevard, all on the south side of the median. So that's 4 lanes you have to accommodate. And then you have 2 lanes southbound, plus a little buffer and a parking area. And that takes up the entire width that we have for the roadway. I will certainly take a look at the other plans. I suspect, once you take away one of the lanes in each direction, you free up at least 20 feet and you can fit in the buffered bike lane. So maybe I misunderstood or misspoke. So I think that's the big concern is in this segment, if we're going to continue to have 2 lanes in each direction, it will be a challenge to come up with a space to be able to provide the buffered bike lane. But as I mentioned, we will look very carefully at ways we can squeeze that. And I know you mentioned removing parking, so we can look into that and look into narrowing the lanes as much as we possibly can.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I don't want there to be this red herring of like, well, as long as you're not having a lane diet, because we've never, or a road diet, we've never gone down to 1 lane at Acadia Boulevard because this is obviously a major traffic light. Like, so at all times when we've been talking about Acadia Streetscape, it's always been 2 lanes in each direction. So it's not like this is something that all of a sudden this is a change. So yeah, that to me, that seems like a red herring that's even brought up. Like we've been dealing with this project at Acadia Boulevard. And so with 2 lanes in both directions and turn lanes since 30% and before. To me, having a bike lane is more important than it being buffered. So, if there's a way for us to go back to having that, but I really want to be clear that we're not directing or asking this project to get derailed over this, because this is, like when you're saying, well, we can go back and look at this and we can take out parking. Like, I know that that's the kind of thing that can make it not actually acceptable by the Coastal Commission. And then we get into like a multi-year process of negotiation. So I really want to be super clear that that you guys and the staff is hearing that message that's not what we want. I mean, that if you are able to move a parking spot, like when we did the buffered bike lane on Highway 101, which was a staff project that they did in-house, they did not remove any parking spots. They did not have any lane diets, and they managed to get a protected bike lane on Highway 101. And that's why we didn't have to go to the Coastal Commission. And that's why it could be done so fast. So it's like recognizing, we're not asking you to do these things that are going to create a multi-year process. But if there is a plan that did accomplish that with the bike lanes, that we really lean back into that's something that you make happen in this plan. I mean, I guess, yeah, I'd like to feel comfortable with that. And I guess because of these other messages, it seems to be kind of getting confused in all this other stuff. But I mean, we're all saying it, right? All 5 of us. So Councilmember Hinsey, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I will just say, I agree with you. It's a huge shock. And part of, all the renderings I've ever looked at have included a bike lane, even though we've maintained the 2 lanes. So my understanding up until this point has been that some of the medians that are existing would need to be shaved down to accomplish more room in the roadway. And so I know that we need that left-hand turn lane onto Acadia Boulevard to extend longer. And that was a cost, I think, about $50,000. And so maybe one of the additive alternates that we need to consider is putting more resource into narrowing the existing medians, because if we're trying to accomplish all these other things, that we plan for that and that we could do that. So that was always my understanding, and maybe we just need to tweak the budget a bit so that we're planning for it.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to hear from the city manager what you hear us saying, so that we can be super clear about this.
Yeah, I mean, we'll have to look and see. There's been lots of iterations. It's possible that Michael Baker had an iteration, but there's just not enough room. So I have no idea where that stopped. You're correct, Mayor. We have a Streetscape meeting, once a month and sometimes twice a month. And I really don't know where it ever dropped off or why, but we can find out.
Okay, so I mean, what I really want to hear though is like, what is the plan going forward so that what's possible is investigated like immediately, and maybe it's not Michael Baker. And I mean, I really worry that this is going to be a multi-month redesign, and that there's some that is there an expedited way to do a bicycle lane analysis that looks back at the 30% plan but that we're moving. I mean, a 9 to 12 months is like a really long time. So as long as we spend redesigning what we're going to the Coastal Commission and NCTD and SANDAG with, the longer this is going to take.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. You're asking me the same question. I don't have an answer for you. The staff moved heaven and earth in a very quick turnaround time period to bring this back. And I'm sure that they can go back and look at what the situation is. One of the clues was somebody saying something about shaving down a median. Maybe that's something that could be looked at. It's also possible that upon further review, there's not enough room, but we can look at it. I promise we won't take 12 months to look at it. How about if you give us a week and we'll look at it and we'll come back and let you know what we found out.
Okay, that's a great timeline. Lillian, did you have your hand up?
No, I just wanted to assure that the team will get right on it. We'll make sure that this is our top priority to get a response. At a minimum, I think we can get an answer as to the feasibility. Perhaps we don't have every design detail, but I think we can say this is definitely possible or it's not, or come up with different options. So I think it's absolutely true that we can put our heads together and we can get a response, as the city manager said, in 1 week.
Okay. Anybody else on the council want to say anything else before we go ahead and vote on the motion? Okay, let's go ahead and vote.
And then Mayor, I just want to clarify the motion to make sure I have it correctly. It was a motion by Deputy Mayor Kranz, a second by Mayor Blakespear, to approve alternative 2 with the added alternatives list, including segment B2 and bus stop improvements.
Yeah, and I mean, I think we should also put into the motion that we'll have an update on the bicycle lane situation in a week. So to be provided.
I would amend my motion in that way. Thanks.
Okay. And I'm just adding that. Give me 1 second. Okay, and then we're ready to vote. Councilmember Hensy?
Yes.
Councilmember Lyons?
Yes.
Councilmember Mosca? Councilmember Mosca?
Yes.
Oh, sorry. It's like Deputy Mayor Kranz?
Yes.
And Mayor Blakespear?
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's exciting. We're here. Let me look at what we have next. Okay. We have no informational items, council member initiated items. The AB 1234 reports. I actually do have something that I want to bring up under that. So I would like to request that we put together the documentation to transfer the Encina Wastewater Board position that I have to Joy Lyons, Councilmember Lyons. I really love being on the Encina Wastewater District. It's a fantastic organization that's very well run, but I also think it's really important that people on the council have the opportunity to serve on other outside boards, because it gives you a great insight into all the different things that municipalities do and also how other organizations are run. And so she has an interest in water and wastewater and landscaping. And So I think this, even though it's a mid-cycle change here, I wanted to go ahead and make that change. I think I'll go to the last board meeting so I can say goodbye to everybody. I've been on it for 4 years since I became the mayor, and Kristen Gaspar was on it before me, and she said it was her favorite board of everything she was ever on. So I think you'll really like it. And Joe Mosca's on it, Councilmember Mosca's on it too, so you'll be doing it together. So I wanted to just, as long as that's what you want, which I think it is.
Yes, yes, it is. Thank you. I appreciate that. I hope to do a good job and follow in your footsteps.
Good. Okay. I have one other quick announcement on the reports from Sandag. So the regional plan, which is like the big plan for 50 years in the county, is something that's being unveiled right now. There was a meeting on Monday where it was the big high level concepts are actual projects. So you can listen to it on Friday at 8:30. There was one on Monday at 8:30, and then it will be voted on. Basically, the vote in Sandag will be to then release it to the public in draft form. So it's really exciting to see this happening at Sandag. You know, this is the regional agency that handles transportation. So having a major new plan that involves substantial investments in transit and a different way of thinking about how we move around is just really exciting. So I'm excited to share that. And yeah, anyone else with their AB 1234, you can put up your hands if you want to say something. Okay, so I think we want to end this meeting. Actually, I'm going to ask the city manager for any city manager report.
Just a quick report, Madam Mayor. We've been receiving some questions about when the city council will again have live in-person council meetings in the chambers. And I just wanted to announce, I had sent something out today that given the county guidance and the state guidance not catching up yet with the CDC, I'm going to recommend that you wait and see what happens on June 15th with the governor's orders and look at the possibility of having our first in-person council meeting on June 23rd if all of the restrictions are lifted. And I'll keep you posted on if there's anything new that comes from that.
Okay, thank you. City attorney or report?
Nope, no reports tonight. Thank you.
City clerk report?
No report.
Okay, I think we want to end the meeting in honor of somebody who was such a Leucadia Streetscape supporter, Charlie Marvin. He passed away, and he said repeatedly at public meetings that he wanted to, it was a race between the Grim Reaper and Streetscape, which would get done first. And unfortunately, he didn't live to even see that first phase can be completed, but he did see it started. He was a big supporter of Leucadia. And I want to ask Councilmember Hinsey if she wants to say a few words about him. He was really a beloved community member.
Yeah, it's funny how much Charlie talked about his death in the context of Streetscape, that it was almost like we were always talking about the day when Charlie died, and the day when Charlie died happened on Monday night, I believe. And it still just caught me off guard because Charlie and I had talked the Monday before, and he had the same fire in his belly for the project and gave me that good old talking to about how to move it forward. And Charlie every day was still out there with his walker, walking up and down Neptune Avenue and enjoying this community that he loved for over 40 years. Charlie published a book when he was 80 years old, and it was called The Tuesday Morning Gang. And it was about the meetings of folks that he met in Encinitas, who are some of the pioneering surfers of the community, surfers who started out never wearing wetsuits because they weren't invented yet. And he put this book together to capture 20 years of history that they made together, meeting at Seaside Market every Tuesday morning. Charlie also collected histories of many Leucadia residents, and he actually put together a book that I don't think has been published yet, but the manuscript is complete. And he will be remembered for his ardent support of not only sand replenishment, which has moved forward in large part thanks to his advocacy, but also historic preservation. And he owned and operated the longest operating inn in the city of Encinitas, which is in the original horseshoe style. And it's the Leucadia Beach Inn that was built in the 1920s. So Charlie's family still runs that inn. And I can't say enough about the strong support that he was in my life to keep pushing forward for a project that was going to preserve our town's history and replace the trees and get everybody around in a way that they could be free of cars. And my heart goes out to his family he's left behind, Kirsten and Todd and Lisa, and his two granddaughters he loved dearly, Kyla and Rory. And maybe there's something Tony would like to add too, because I know Tony's known him for a long time.
I can't add to that. I will just say that he was irascible and good-humored and one of the great people to run across whenever I was out and about. So I will miss him dearly. And yes, he had a dark sense of humor, because he did indeed remind us every time that he was, that this was a race. And it was very disheartening to get the news that he had passed away. So he and Morgan Mallory are celebrating together, and all it does is make me that much more dedicated to getting this project completed, because I think both of their visions were a big part of getting it to where it is today.
Well, thank you for all that. So with that, we will adjourn in honor of Charlie Marvin.